Chapter 333. This strange place was incomparably dim, as if it had formed a small world of its own. However, in this place, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth was so dense that it left one speechless. On this piece of land, an ancient and complicated formation was still operating, as if it had existed for 1,000 years. Along with the operation of this ancient formation, the spiritual qi in the world was maintained at an extremely rich state. There was a ball of light above this ancient formation. Yi Guchen's body lay within the ball of light. His clothes were almost completely torn apart, and his body was charred black. Terrifying wounds covered his body, and his flesh was charred black. It was a shocking sight. On Yi Guchen's body, there was a pitch-black wooden tablet with the word, "One" carved on it. This was the mysterious wooden tablet that Yi Guchen had bought with 10,000 crystal jades in the market of the 100 Broken Cities. It was also this wooden tablet that had released this ball of light, and transported Yi Guchen here. Time passed silently. Yi Guchen's vitality had almost completely disappeared, and only a breath remained. Yi Guchen's injuries were too severe this time, and he was at the center of the collision between the two types of strange lightning. Therefore he had suffered the greatest impact. Even now, one could see purple lightning and silver lightning shooting out of Yi Guchen's body from time to time, erupting into a series of sparks. Originally, with Yi Guchen's cultivation he would have died without a doubt. However, Yi Guchen had used his physical body to withstand the impact of the extreme void profound lightning in the area of the lightning tide. Under the influence of this impact, Yi Guchen's body had a certain degree of resistance to the extreme void profound lightning. Not only that, Yi Guchen had also been baptized by the fortune golden pool. In the end, he had even been tempered by the golden body elixir. Under these various conditions, Yi Guchen had managed to retain a trace of life. At this moment, if one could look into Yi Guchen's body, one would see the purple nether lightning and the extreme void profound lightning, these two types of strange lightning, ceaselessly wreaking havoc in Yi Guchen's meridians, bones, and internal organs, causing them to be charred black. However, there was still a large amount of golden body fluid. Every time Yi Guchen's body was injured by the mutated lightning, the golden body elixir would refine, nourish, and heal the wounds. Yi Guchen's physical body was also greatly tempered by the repeated destruction and healing. One could even vaguely see a greenish-gold luster flashing on the surface of his skin. This meant that Yi Guchen's indestructible body was transforming into a flawless body. Rumble. The ancient array continued to operate, and the rich spiritual energy of the world seeped into Yi Guchen's body bit by bit, allowing his withered meridians to recover. Yi Guchen was in a coma for almost half a month. In this half a month, the Saint Origin dynasty was stirred up again. As the Saint Origin dynasty's treasured land, the Void Sword Realm attracted everyone's attention. In this trip to the Void Sword Realm, many of the 7 major forces suffered heavy losses, and even Xianhao was injured. Not only that, the 3 palaces were completely destroyed, and no one survived. This news was like a huge rock falling into the ocean, causing huge waves. The 7 major forces were all shaken. When the truth was finally revealed, the name of the sword sex Yi Guchen once again shook the entire dynasty. Yi Guchen's reputation was at its peak after the battle in the Infinite Wasteland Plain. However, as the news of Yi Guchen being crippled spread out, Yi Guchen's reputation gradually fell. Although it wasn't to the extent that no one cared, it was still a lot weaker. This time, when the news was spread, Yi Guchen once again shook the world. In the Sword Pavilion, he suppressed Xianhao and took away half of the sword arts. In the Pill Hall, his talent test shook the heavens and earth, and even Xianhao was not comparable to him. After that, when Mu Xingzu was besieged, Yi Guchen single-handedly blocked hundreds of elites with his sword, which left everyone speechless. That shocking battle record of killing hundreds of people with a single sword shocked everyone, and they were all amazed by the terror of the sword sect. In the end, Yi Guchen even sacrificed himself, colliding with the strange lightning, and unleashing a destructive lightning tide, killing hundreds of elites in one fell swoop. Such courage, such means, such boldness at the same time, it shocked everyone, and at the same time, it also made them admire him. Of course, the forces that suffered from it were filled with anger and hatred. However, Yi Guqin being swept into the spatial turbulence was witnessed by everyone. Therefore, even if they were resentful, they had nowhere to vent their anger. However, there were some elites among these forces who spread the news. In the three palaces, someone said the words of the Little War Emperor after hearing the news. Ji Yan has 1/10 of my strength. It's not bad that Yi Guqin was able to kill him. In the saber-sealing monarch palace, one of the three sabers, the strongest demonic saber, Lung Ju said, even if Yi Guqin doesn't die, he will hate my demonic saber. LV Qing Han of the Consonant's Divine Palace said, it's a pity that I haven't seen the sword sect. I'm curious, what kind of demeanor does such a sword cultivator have? When the elites of the major forces heard the news, they more or less paid attention to Yi Guqin again. Unfortunately, in their eyes, Yi Guqin was already a dead person. However, the atmosphere in the sword sect's forest of pagodas was somewhat gloomy. Mu Xingzu woke up 3 days later. Her face was pale, and she was still in a daze. Unconsciously, she would walk to the bamboo forest where Yi Guqin had taught her swordsmanship. She raised her head and looked at the falling bamboo leaves, crying silently. As for Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others, although they wanted to comfort her, they didn't know what to say. When Yan Wushuang heard the news at the first peak of the inner sect, she was neither happy nor sad. She couldn't describe what she was feeling. She walked out of the sword sect pagoda. Feng Manlu stood alone outside the sword sect pagoda's corridor. His expression was calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath and said, Uncle Feng, do you know the news? Feng Manlu's figure slowly landed in front of Yan Wushuang with a complicated expression. If what Yi Guqin did in the Void Sword realm is true, then Shuang will also admire him, Yan Wushuang said. Do you believe that he's dead? Feng Manlu suddenly asked. Uncle Feng, even you don't want to face reality? As an inner sect disciple, Yi Guqin died to protect Mu Xingzu and the others. It's indeed respectable, so Shuang won't be happy, but he's dead. Then Uncle Feng, your successor. Yan Wushuang gritted her teeth. She thought that since Yi Guqin was dead, the only person Feng Manlu could rely on was her. Shuang, there are many things that are uncertain. Moreover, there's still time before the battle at the top of the Forbidden City. Let's put this matter aside for now. Feng Manlu shook his head slightly. Uncle Feng, he's already dead. Why won't you change your mind? Right now, only I, Yan Wushuang, have the strength to become your successor and head to the Forbidden Violet Peak to fight against Prime Sovereign. Yan Wushuang couldn't take it anymore and shouted. Shuang, you're naturally strong and you don't lose to men. This is both a strength and a weakness. Sooner or later, you'll suffer because of this. Feng Manlu sighed deeply and turned to enter the Sword Sect Pagoda. Outside the Sword Sect Pagoda, Yan Wushuang clenched her slender hands so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Why? How am I inferior to Yi Guqin? Even if he's dead, Uncle Feng still won't let me become your successor. Yan Wushuang couldn't bear it, and the aura of the 9 changes of the divine soul spread out uncontrollably. It took a long time for Yan Wushuang to calm down her fluctuating emotions. Uncle Feng, time will prove everything. The inner sect ranking battle is about to begin. If Yi Guqin doesn't appear by then you can completely give up. I'll maintain the first place of the inner sect and prove to you that Shuang is capable. Yan Wushuang's tone was firm and her beautiful eyes flashed with a resolute light. She muttered to herself and turned to leave. While the various forces were shocked by what had happened in the Void Sword realm, the eyelids of Yi Guqin, who was in the middle of the ancient formation in that strange place, trembled slightly as he finally woke up. Chapter 334. I'm not dead yet. Yi Guqin's hoarse voice came out of his mouth. He forced his heavy eyelids open and saw this strange place. Where is this? Yi Guqin was momentarily dazed. In fact, he did not fear death. That was what Yi Guqin thought the moment he was sucked into the spatial rift. It was a pity that he had yet to reach the peak of the sword Dao. Death is not scary. What's scary is that my sword has yet to reach the Dao. Yi Guqin only had this thought in his mind at that time. However, just as Yi Guqin felt that he was about to be torn apart by the spatial turbulence, he suddenly sensed that the mysterious broken wooden tablet in his origin ring was trembling slightly. It was also at that critical moment that Yi Guchen took out this pitch-black wooden tablet. After that, Yi Guchen fainted due to his heavy injuries. When he woke up, he was already here. Could it be that this wooden tablet needs to be activated by the power of space in order to be effective? No wonder there was no reaction no matter how I probed before. Yi Guchen came to a realization. The thing that was least lacking in the spatial rift was the power of space. It was also in such an environment that the pitch-black wooden tablet's effect was unexpectedly activated and turned into a ball of light that transported Yi Guchen to this place. Several hours passed after Yi Guchen woke up. As the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth seeped into Yi Guchen's body, his body could finally move temporarily. This time, I'm really in a sorry state. Yi Guchen laughed bitterly. His condition was very bad and his injuries were very serious. However, when Yi Guchen looked around, he discovered that this was a large formation. Could this be an Earth-level spirit-gathering formation? Yi Guchen said with a strange look in his eyes. With Yi Guchen's current understanding of formations, he knew that formations were divided into 3 levels: heaven, earth, and mortal. Disregarding everything else, Yi Guchen's own body contained an earth-level spirit design, the sword formation of the 6 paths of Azura. However, with Yi Guchen's current cultivation base, he was unable to activate this earth-level array. However, the ancient and complicated spirit formation before him was definitely not a mortal-level spirit formation. It could only be an earth-level spirit formation. Yi Guchen thought of the word 1 engraved on the black wooden tablet. Could it be that this strange place is the ancient void sword sect's hidden practice place in a small space, so there is an earth-level spirit gathering array, and this wooden token is the token to enter this place? Yi Guchen was enlightened and immediately understood the cause and effect. Furthermore, the word 1 on this wooden plaque should represent the best place for cultivation, which is this earth-level spirit gathering array. Yi Guchen's eyes grew brighter and brighter. He was certain that there was more than one such wooden plaque. It was only because other people could not detect the use of this wooden plaque that they sold it to the vendor. And Yi Guchen, if he had not been involved in the space turbulence, he certainly would not have known the use of this wooden plaque. It's a blessing in disguise. Yi Guchen's mouth evoked a faint arc. The Earth-level spirit gathering array was an excellent place for cultivation. Not to mention the Saint Origin dynasty. Even in the big forces of the South Horizon region, the Earth-level spirit gathering array was not something that could be arranged casually. The consumption of manpower and material resources was very large. And perhaps only those geniuses of the big forces were qualified to use the Earth-level spirit gathering array. For Yi Guchen, this was an absolutely great opportunity. Let's heal first. Yi Guchen grabbed a lot of healing pills from the bronze furnace and refined them into his body. In addition to the vigorous spiritual energy gathered by the spirit gathering array, it was only a matter of time before Yi Guchen's injuries healed. In the process of healing, Yi Guchen unexpectedly found that his physical body had become stronger. If it was said that the invincible Vajra body had only transformed by 30% before, then now, the invincible Vajra body had transformed by 50%. In other words, half of Yi Guchen's invincible Vajra body had transformed into a flawless body. This was also a pleasant surprise. Yi Guchen looked into his body, trying to find the reason. What surprised him was that the purple nether lightning and void profound lightning in his body, these 2 equally domineering types of lightning, should have been like fire and water. However, during this long period of collision, these 2 types of heavenly lightning actually gradually merged together. Gradually, they turned into silver-purple lightning. Yi Guchen was a little confused. Previously, he used the collision of lightning only because he was forced into a desperate situation. Even he did not expect that the lightning would undergo such a change and slowly merge together. But it was obvious that the merged silver-purple lightning was more powerful than the purple nether lightning and void profound lightning. In fact, Yi Guchen felt that even Xianhao's 9th heaven profound lightning was not as powerful as this silver-purple lightning. With this lightning, I have hope of a breakthrough. Yi Guchen took a deep breath and began to heal his injuries. And in this healing process, The merging of the two types of lightning also became faster and faster. Finally, from Yi Guchen's body, rumbling sounds could be heard from time to time. The ripples of lightning were more powerful than any single type of lightning. After another 2 days, with the support of the Earth-grade spirit gathering array, Yi Guchen's injuries had not completely healed, but they were about half healed. As long as I can make a breakthrough and undergo a new transformation, my injuries will be healed immediately. Yi Guchen's eyes were clear. He did not intend to rest anymore and directly wanted to make a breakthrough. I have waited for this day for too long. Only my own strength is the most real. An aura rose from Yi Guchen's body. It was a kind of resolute will that belonged to the strong. He no longer hesitated and began to refine the strange lightning. Refining strange lightning was an extremely dangerous thing to do. But Yi Guchen's body had been baptized by the void profound lightning, and the two types of strange lightning had existed in his body for a long time. Therefore, Yi Guchen did not encounter too much of a problem with this refinement. Finally, after another day, the two types of strange lightning finally merged together and completely transformed into a silver-purple lightning. And Yi Guchen just happened to completely refine this silver-purple lightning and make it his own. Yi Guchen slowly raised his hand. Between his fingers, purple lightning first darted out, and then silver lightning burst forth. Yi Guchen's mind moved and the two types of strange lightning merged together, turning into a silver-purple lightning that was extremely powerful. After refining the strange lightning, Yi Guchen could freely merge or separate the two types of strange lightning. It was very convenient. Unfortunately, after the two types of strange lightning completely merged, the destructive force of the collision no longer existed. The strange lightning formed by the merging of two types of strange lightning will be called the purple void profound lightning. Yi Guchen thought to himself, purple void profound lightning, purple void profound lightning. When combined, it was just right to call it the purple void profound lightning. Since the strange lightning has been refined, it's time to tear the seal of the Qi Si. Yi Guchen's eyes surged with a bright light. Gu Xiaoyang, you didn't expect this, did you? You thought you could cripple me, but now, I'm even stronger than before. One day, I'll let you taste something 10,000 times more painful than sealing your Qi Si. Yi Guchen did not hesitate and directly used the merged purple void profound lightning to attack his Qi Si. This was the moment to tear the seal. Chapter 335. In the Strange Land, inside the Earth-class spirit gathering array, Yi Guchen activated the purple void mystic lightning in his body and attacked his Qi vessel with all his might. Outside his Qi vessel, the threads released by the soul star spirit devouring parasite overlapped and sealed the entire Qi vessel. If it were any other ordinary martial artist, they would be powerless and helpless in this situation. Even if they had the exotic lightning, they would not dare to use it to tear the seal. This was because even if ordinary warriors could use the exotic lightning to tear the seal, the exotic lightning would explode and destroy the entire Qi vessel after entering the Qi vessel. However, Yi Guchen was different. Yi Guchen cultivated the mysterious 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra had 9 tribulations. Each tribulation had great risks, but as long as one could survive it, the gains would be indescribable. Rumble. The purple void mystic lightning formed by the fusion of 2 exotic lightnings was extremely powerful. The cocoon formed by the threads trembled, and the power of stars overflowed from its surface. Gu Xiaoyang's Eye of Stars is quite mysterious. It can produce such a parasite to seal the Qi vessel. Yi Guchen frowned slightly. Even with the power of the purple void mystic lightning, it could not break the seal in one strike. Again. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed with cold lightning. The purple void mystic lightning in his body seemed to boil as it surged towards the sealed Qi vessel. Once. Twice. Thrice. Yi Guchen's body was like a heavenly drum, constantly rumbling. Every time the sound was heard, his body would shoot out silver-purple lightning. If not for the Earth-class spirit gathering array being extremely sturdy, the overflowing lightning would have been enough to tear the earth apart. Rumble. Another rumble sounded. The sealing cocoon, which was formed by the silver threads, finally began to slowly split open a small crack. Within it, The soul star spirit devouring parasite seemed to have sensed danger and let out a sharp cry. Swoosh. Threads were spat out from the parasite's mouth again, trying to close the crack. Wishful thinking. Yi Guchen activated the purple void mystic lightning and sent it towards the crack. Rumble. Lightning swirled around and flashed. After an instant of rumbling, the silver sealing cocoon was finally completely torn apart. Along with the release of the seal, a wave of horrifying genuine qi gushed out from Yi Guchen's qi. Bang. It was as if a tornado had been set off in this strange place. A terrifying storm of true energy swept out from Yi Guchen's body. Even Yi Guchen could no longer suppress it. He raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl. Boom. Terrifying golden true qi gushed out from his qi like a vast ocean. Even though the goo venomous insect absorbed Yi Guchen's vital energy every day, it was still unable to dry up. An indescribable golden wave of true qi surged out from Yi Guchen's body. The shattering of the golden qi was not truly shattering. Instead, it was standing after the shattering. After the qi shattered, an even more terrifying wave of true qi gathered in Yi Guchen's dantian. That wave of true qi was vast and boundless, as if it contained the entire world. Boom. At this moment, even the Earth-level spirit gathering formation seemed to have been summoned, and it began to operate even more rapidly with a rumble. The terrifying spirit qi in the surroundings was like 100 rivers converging into the sea, all of it converging into Yi Guchen's dantian. 1,000 feet. 2,000 feet. 3,000 feet. The new qi in Yi Guchen's body was rapidly forming. In the end, Yi Guchen's dantian did not even look like a golden qi, but like a real vast ocean. Boom. At a certain moment, a violent roar came from Yi Guchen's body, and a vast and boundless golden qi was completely formed. The limit of the qi had been broken through. As the qi surged, it was like a huge wave sweeping across the sky. Yi Guchen stretched out his hand and slightly activated the true qi in his qi. An extremely vast wave of true qi surged out from within. Boom. An extremely vigorous golden true qi burst out with a loud bang, as if a golden true dragon had emerged from the sea. Is this the limit of 100,000 feet qi? Even Yi Guchen was shocked when he felt the nearly endless true qi in his dantian. Yi Guchen was even certain that his true qi would not be depleted even if he used the Thousand Deities Tribulation sword technique now. Even the second move, Life Fall, could be used more than once by Yi Guchen in a short period of time. As for sword techniques like the God-slaying sword technique, which consumed a lot of true qi, it was like sprinkling water to the limit of the qi. The amount of true qi I have now far exceeds when I took the Mad Demon Blood Ignition Elixir. Yi Guchen's eyes were very bright. His current state was even better than when he took the Mad Demon Blood Ignition Elixir. After completely overcoming the spirit tribulation in his qi, Yi Guchen's physical injuries were almost completely healed. This was also the benefit of breaking through. At the same time, Yi Guchen also learned about the third tribulation after the spirit tribulation in his qi. Of course, compared to understanding the third tribulation, Yi Guchen had more important things to do now. That was to break through to the divine soul realm. Yi Guchen went from the perfect physical body to the limit of the qi. Every stage of his cultivation could be said to be perfect. Only after breaking through the limit of the qi could Yi Guchen break through to the divine soul realm. Yi Guchen had to lay down the perfect foundation for himself at every step of his cultivation. Gu Xiaoyang, Xian Hao Yin Wu Shuang. As long as I have the strength, I can break through these obstacles. Yi Guchen flipped his wrist and took out the Heavenly Soul Infant Soul Elixir from the bronze alchemy furnace. With the Heavenly Soul Infant Soul Elixir, how many changes can I break through to? Yi Guchen's lips curled into a faint smile as he swallowed the Heavenly Soul Infant Soul Elixir. In the next moment, a similarly vast wave of soul power spread out from Yi Guchen's mind. The divine soul realm had officially begun to break through. Chapter 336. Inside the Earth-level spirit gathering array. After Yi Guchen consumed the infant soul elixir, his mind buzzed. A stream of extremely pure and vigorous soul power gushed into Yi Guchen's mind. Yi Guchen's soul power wasn't weak, and he had refined many spirit elixirs. Later on, he even received the undying soul pearl from Yingning. To put it bluntly, even if Yi Guchen hadn't broken through to the divine soul realm, his soul power wasn't any weaker than an ordinary divine soul realm expert. The only difference was that Yi Guchen hadn't condensed his sea of consciousness yet. But now, Yi Guchen had accumulated a lot of energy and could have broken through to the divine soul realm. Moreover, he had taken the infant heavenly soul elixir, which was a divine elixir. Rumble. In Yi Guchen's mind, it was as if the heavens and earth had been created. Terrifying soul power swirled like a whirlpool. Above the whirlpool, the sub-pearl of the immortal soul pearl also released a vigorous soul power to help Yi Guchen condense his sea of consciousness. Vaguely, the embryonic form of his sea of consciousness had been formed. The infant soul elixir had the effect of helping to condense one's sea of consciousness. Therefore, Yi Guchen didn't spend much effort to condense his sea of consciousness. As the sea of consciousness gradually formed, Yi Guchen could clearly feel that his 5 senses had become extremely sharp. It was like a dusty mirror that had been polished. Yi Guchen could now see everything and listen to everything. Even the slightest movement couldn't escape his soul perception. Moreover, this was only the initial stage of the sea of consciousness. As time passed, Yi Guchen took out a large number of heavenly soul elixirs, spirit elixirs and other elixirs that helped to cultivate soul power. He swallowed them like pouring beans into his mouth. Rumble. In Yi Guchen's mind, the sea of consciousness formed by his soul power had been completely formed. At this moment, Yi Guchen's body suddenly shook. A transparent and terrifying soul power ripple spread out in all directions. As his spiritual strength spread out, a powerful spiritual pressure was also released. This kind of soul pressure would affect anyone whose soul power was lower than Yi Guchen's. Even some Qi refinement realm martial artists would directly kneel under this pressure. But Yi Guchen's breakthrough was obviously not that simple. The sea of consciousness in his mind was still spinning. After the sea of consciousness completed a full cycle, Yi Guchen's mind buzzed once more. Divine soul transformation breakthrough. However, this was only the beginning and far from the end. With the effects of the heavenly soul nascent soul pill and the support of the many treasure pills, Yi Guchen's spiritual energy was far from reaching its limit. His sea of consciousness rotated for the second time. Boom. Second divine soul transformation. Breakthrough. Boom. Third transformation of the divine soul. Breakthrough. Boom. Fourth transformation of the divine soul. Breakthrough. Such a terrifying breakthrough speed would definitely scare a group of so-called cultivation geniuses to death in the outside world. Even if Xianhao saw this, he would definitely be unable to conceal his shock. He had spent a few years to cultivate the 9 transformation of the divine soul. It was not achieved overnight. But Yi Guchen was different. He had been accumulating for a long time. Since the sea of Qi in the infinite plane was sealed, Yi Guchen had been accumulating his strength and accumulating it. Now that he had the help of the heavenly soul nascent soul pill, Yi Guchen had to break through. In the end, Yi Guchen's cultivation stopped at the 6th transformation of the divine soul. If the news of him breaking through from the Qi refinement realm to the 6th transformation of the divine soul spread, not to mention the Saint Origin dynasty, even the big forces in the Nantian region would find it unbelievable. Unless he was a real top genius or a supreme talent above the 9th grade, it was impossible to have such a cultivation speed. Is this the power of the 6th transformation of the divine soul? Yi Guchen slowly raised his hand and activated the genuine Qi in his body. Then he released his spiritual energy from the sea of consciousness to control the genuine Qi. As the golden genuine Qi surged, it condensed into a small golden sword that seemed to be solid. This was the symbol of the divine soul realm, the genuine Qi condensation. However, if one wanted to condense the genuine Qi like Yi Guchen, one would need to be at least at the 8th transformation of the divine soul. But Yi Guchen, who was at the 6th transformation of the divine soul, had already reached this level. This heavenly soul nascent soul pill is rumored to allow one to break through to the 9th transformation of the divine soul. Why did I only break through to the 6th transformation? Yi Guchen was a little confused. He pondered for a while, and suddenly understood. Yi Guchen could be said to be perfect in every realm. Perfect body, extreme sea of qi, etc. Therefore, after Yi Guchen broke through to the divine soul realm, his sea of consciousness naturally condensed in the direction of perfection. As a result, the heavenly soul nascent soul pill could not help Yi Guchen. In order to make the sea of consciousness perfect, the consumption was too great. If it was an ordinary warrior, one heavenly soul nascent soul pill was enough to let him reach the 9th transformation of the divine soul. But Yi Guchen couldn't do that. Although I have not reached the 9th transformation of the divine soul, my soul power is not weaker than any 9th transformation of the divine soul. Moreover, as long as I can pass the 3rd calamity, the sea of consciousness soul calamity. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. 9 Calamity Heart Sutra. The first calamity, blood calamity of the physical body, was to forge a perfect body. The second calamity, spiritual calamity of the sea of qi, was to open up the extreme sea of qi. And the third calamity was the sea of consciousness soul calamity. The sea of consciousness soul calamity is also divided into 3 minor calamities. After passing the first minor calamity, one can condense the small perfection of the sea of consciousness. After passing the second minor calamity, one can condense the great perfection of the sea of consciousness. If one can pass the third minor calamity, then one can condense the chaotic sea of consciousness. Yi Guchen's eyes shone brightly. The chaotic sea of consciousness. This was what Yi Guchen could obtain after passing the sea of consciousness soul calamity. Perfect physical body, limitless sea of qi, chaotic sea of consciousness. If I can successfully cultivate all of them, how strong will I be? Yi Guchen clenched his fist, his eyes filled with anticipation. And Yi Guchen knew that if he could successfully cultivate the chaotic sea of consciousness, in the future, if he could reach the stage of condensing the primordial spirit, he could condense the chaotic primordial spirit. The immortal soul pearl allowed Senior Yingning to possess the immortal primordial spirit. What's the use of the chaotic primordial spirit? How is it compared to the immortal primordial spirit? Yi Guchen was very curious. The secrets of the primordial spirit were also very interesting. But after thinking for a while, Yi Guchen shook his head with a smile. Not to mention the chaotic primordial spirit, even the chaotic sea of consciousness was a little far away from him. The most important thing now is to find a way to pass the first minor calamity of the sea of consciousness soul calamity. The thing I need is a rare heaven and earth fire that can burn the soul. Where can I find it? Yi Guchen was thinking. Rare heaven and earth fire was originally a rare thing. And a rare heaven and earth fire that could burn the soul was even rarer. Rumor has it that the fire tribe of the barbarian tribe in the land of 5 elements has more than one rare heaven and earth fire. Is it possible to obtain a rare heaven and earth fire that can burn the soul in the fire tribe? Yi Guchen suddenly thought. But it was useless to think about it now. Just as Yi Guchen was about to find a way to leave this place, there was a sudden movement from his dantian. It's this goo worm, and the sword of thunder calamity? Yi Guchen was surprised. Chapter 337. Inside Yi Guchen's dantian. The goo worm in the endless limit Qi Sea was emitting bright starlight all over its body. This starlight was like a transformation. In addition, outside the Qi Sea, the thunder calamity sword that had been dormant in his dantian began to vibrate again. With this tremor, Yi Guchen suddenly felt that the earth-level Qi gathering formation beneath his feet was operating even more rapidly. Then this spirit gathering formation started to operate at full power. A terrifying amount of heaven and earth spirit Qi gathered towards the thunder calamity sword in Yi Guchen's dantian. This scene caused Yi Guchen to be stunned for a moment. However, there was a faint trace of joy in his eyes. Every time there was a change in the thunder calamity sword, it was a blessing for Yi Guchen. Could it be? Yi Guchen had a guess in his heart. The boundless spirit Qi produced by the earth-level spirit gathering formation was directly absorbed by the thunder calamity sword in Yi Guchen's dantian. As the spiritual energy flowed in, some small words gradually appeared on the ancient jet black sword body. Could it be the third move of thousand deity tribulation? Yi Guqin sat cross-legged on the ground and calmed his mind. The Supreme Sword Technique Thousand Deity Tribulation was Yi Guqin's strongest sword technique. Even the Supreme Grade King level sword technique Great Void Sword Wave was not as high as Thousand Deity Tribulation. It should be known that with the second move of Thousand Deity Tribulation, Common Life Fall, Yi Guqin could cross 2 realms and injure Gu Xiaoyang, who was at life and death chamber. Just this point alone was enough to prove the power of Thousand Deity Tribulation. However, Yi Guqin felt that it was a pity. Even with the spiritual energy provided by the Earth Grade Spirit Gathering Formation, it could only make some blurry words appear on the body of the sword, making it hard to distinguish. It seems that it is still not enough. The Thunder Calamity sword needs to absorb more and stronger energy to manifest the third move of Thousand Deity Tribulation. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly, but he wasn't disappointed. If there was an opportunity, the third move would be revealed sooner or later. There was no need to rush. After the Lightning Tribulation sword finished absorbing the spirit energy from the Spirit Gathering Formation, Yi Guqin turned his attention to the Gu worms in his Qi. Gu worms could not even absorb 1,000 feet of Qi. Now that his Qi had broken through to the limit of 100,000 feet, Yi Guqin naturally would not care about this Gu. But now, the Gu worm seemed to have undergone some shocking changes. Yi Guqin looked into his sea of Qi, and saw that after the Gu devoured a large amount of true Qi, a crack had appeared on its back. This is... Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. As the Gu worm absorbed more and more golden Qi, the crack on its back also became bigger and bigger. Finally, a bright butterfly flapped its wings and flew out from the crack on the Gu worm's back. This is... Yi Guqin was momentarily stunned. Although he had previously guessed that this spirit star-devouring Gu worm might undergo some changes after absorbing enough true Qi, but Yi Guqin did not expect such a transformation to occur. The dazzling silver butterfly's body shone with light, and its wings were covered with star-like patterns. Then this silver butterfly flapped its wings and flew out of the sea of Qi. In the end, it flew into Yi Guqin's sea of consciousness. What's going on? Yi Guqin was extremely surprised. And that silver butterfly flapped its wings again, and a translucent silver soul wave rippled out. After Yi Guqin sensed this soul wave, he actually received some information. This butterfly is called the Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly. It is a life spirit that can protect the sea of consciousness. The Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly can block any soul attack of the enemy. Not only that, it can also release star soul waves to attack the sea of consciousness of others. The Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly's soul wave transmitted such information. This made Yi Guqin surprised and delighted. After a warrior cultivated to the divine soul realm, the sea of consciousness of the soul became a very important means. For example, Mu Xingzu released the soul sword essence with the immortal soul pearl, and directly destroyed the sea of consciousness of hundreds of people. And if these people had a protective spiritual object in their sea of consciousness, then they would not have died so easily. But this Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly was not only a spiritual object, but also a life spirit. In other words, unless it was some special soul attack, the Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly could block some ordinary soul pressure and attack. This was a great opportunity. Not only that, but Yi Guqin could also urge the Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly to release star soul waves to attack the sea of consciousness of others. Presumably, even Gu Xiaoyang did not know that the spirit star-devouring Gu worm would undergo such a transformation after absorbing enough true Qi. Gu Xiaoyang, you thought you brought me a disaster, but now it has become my opportunity. Yi Guqin's eyes lit up. In his sea of consciousness, the Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly stayed on the immortal soul pearl, and absorbed the pure soul power in it. Yi Guqin looked carefully, and found that there was a bright spot like a star on the Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly's wings. And as it absorbed the soul power, there seemed to be the embryonic form of a second star spot faintly appearing. Could it be that this Meteorite Demonic Soul Butterfly is still in its infancy, and can still grow in the future? Thinking of this, Yi Guqin was also surprised. Not only was it a spiritual object, but it was also a life spirit that could grow and evolve. Even in the entire South Horizon region, there were not many geniuses who could own such a rare spiritual object. After that, Yi Guchen observed for a while, and was relieved. Perhaps it was because the meteorite demonic soul butterfly relied on Yi Guchen's true qi to transform, so this butterfly was also quite close to Yi Guchen. It was absolutely impossible that Gu Xiaoyang had hidden something in it. After being completely relieved, Yi Guchen allowed the meteorite demonic soul butterfly to absorb the soul power in his sea of consciousness. Anyway, his soul power was not inferior to that of an expert in the 9 transformations of the divine soul realm. He did not lack soul power at all. Next, I will leave this place. Presumably, everyone in the 7 major forces will think that I am dead. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed with a faint light. The killing calamity that he had created would definitely cause a storm. If he was dead, it would be fine. But if the news that Yi Guchen was alive spread out, it would definitely cause a great commotion. He would be a thorn in the side of many forces. But Yi Guchen was not afraid at all. When he was in the Qi refinement realm, he dared to confront 3 heaven and earth spirit bridge experts. Now that his strength had increased, he was even more fearless. Now that I think about it, the inner yard ranking battle should be starting soon. Let's leave first. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed as he looked for a way to leave. He did not want to miss the inner yard ranking battle. If he really missed it, he would have to give up his venerable cave abode. However, not long after, Yi Guchen found a teleportation array in a remote place. Yi Guchen tried to put the black wooden token in. The teleportation array suddenly lit up. The black wooden token released a ball of light that wrapped Yi Guchen in it. Then, with a flash, Yi Guchen's figure disappeared from the place. Chapter 338. 500 miles away from the floating mountain. In a desolate valley where monsters roamed freely. On the ground, a transportation array covered in yellow dust suddenly lit up. In the light, a ball of light appeared and dissipated in an instant, revealing Yi Guchen's figure. He raised his hand slightly, and the wooden tablet in his hand that was already cracked and shattered completely turned into powder with a puff. This is a life bought with 10,000 crystal jades. Yi Guchen sighed. Shaking his head slightly, Yi Guchen stopped thinking about it. The only thing he needed to do now was to rush back to the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas. Where is this place? Yi Guchen was stunned. And then the sea of consciousness in his mind suddenly churned. A wave of soul perception spread out like a tide. 50 feet, 10 feet, 100 feet. Yi Guchen's soul perception range was still expanding. But if other soul experts were to see this, they would be so shocked that their eyeballs would fall out. For an ordinary soul expert, having a soul perception range of 10 feet was already good enough. Even an expert of the 6th transformation of the divine soul could only reach 20 to 30 feet. Even for a 9th transformation expert like Xian Hao, 100 feet was already the limit. And to maintain a 100 feet range, it would consume a lot of soul energy, so it couldn't be maintained for long. But Yi Guchen, in the blink of an eye, his soul perception range had spread out to 150 feet. Finally, when it reached 200 feet, Yi Guchen felt that he was about to reach his limit. My soul perception far surpasses that of ordinary soul experts. And if I can pass the first minor tribulation and cultivate the small perfection sea of consciousness, then what level will my soul perception reach? Yi Guchen had just entered the divine soul realm, and was very curious about the soul perception methods of the divine soul realm. Yi Guchen could clearly sense the ferocious aura of all kinds of demonic beasts after he spread his divine soul perception. These monsters were mostly 4th-rank monsters, but there were also a few ordinary 5th-rank monsters. Kill my way out. If Yi Guchen was still in the Qi refinement realm, it would be troublesome to fall into this situation. But after breaking through to the 6th transformation of the divine soul realm, Yi Guchen was completely unafraid of rank 4 monstrous beasts. He had just broken through and needed some demonic beasts to practice. In the worst-case scenario, with the vermilion bird wings, as long as he doesn't encounter a peak rank 5 demonic beast, his chances of escaping are still very high. Whoosh! Yi Guchen used Shadow Step, his figure leaving behind an afterimage. His strength had increased greatly, and he had also improved significantly in all aspects. Roar! A rank 4 demonic beast, the umbra-clouded leopard, appeared in front of him. Its entire body emitted a ferocious aura. If it had been before, Yi Guqin would have had to use some tricks to deal with such a monster. But now Qila. Yi Guqin directly stretched out his hand. Silver purple void profound lightning gathered and rolled in his palm, forming a ball of lightning that directly shot towards the Umbra Cloud Leopard. Although Umbra-clouded leopards were known for their speed, how could they be faster than lightning? Moreover, the Void Extreme Profound Bombs also possessed the extreme speed of shuttling through the void. Boom! The purple void profound lightning hit the Umbra-clouded leopard. This rank 4 monstrous beast directly trembled all over, its fur charred black, and it let out a miserable howl. Yi Guqin swept forward, and with a simple sweep of his sword, the Umbra-clouded leopard was beheaded. Hiss hiss. A rank 4 monstrous python stared at Yi Guqin in the dark, then suddenly rushed out. I sensed you long ago. Yi Guqin had a faint smile on his lips as he turned around and swung his sword. Void sword technique, 1,000-layered waves. Streaks of transparent sword waves swept out, and that rank 4 monstrous python was directly shaken to death. Just like that, Yi Guqin killed his way out of the rank 4 monstrous beast horde. Sword light split the sky. True chi rumbled, and soul power surged. He was incomparably powerful as he swept out all the way. With his current strength, rank 4 monstrous beasts could hardly stop his footsteps. And just as Yi Guqin swept through the monstrous beast-barren valley, there was a gradually fiery atmosphere in the swordsmanship-seeking mountain range, where the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was located. Although some time ago, after learning that Yi Guqin had fallen in the Void Sword realm, the entire Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was silent for a period of time. Especially those outer court disciples who were quite respectful of Yi Guqin. They sighed all day long, regretting the fall of the Sword Sect. But after all, people had to look forward. Although they respected Yi Guqin, they did not have a deep relationship with him. So as time passed, the silent atmosphere gradually dissipated. As for the inner court, their attitudes were very clearly divided into 2 groups. Led by Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, and the others after Yi Guqin's fall, they seemed to be relieved in their hearts. Even Wang Xiaotian, who had suffered the tragic treatment of the Divine Eagle, recovered a smile on his face. On the contrary, Qin Lin, who should be the happiest, was unexpectedly calm and did not have any joy. Originally, with her relationship with Yi Guqin, Qin Lin, should be very happy after hearing the news. But Qin Lin, found that she was not as happy as she imagined. There was even a trace of pity. Especially when Qin Lin, recalled Yi Guqin strangling her jade neck and staring at her with cold eyes. It made her delicate body feel numb all over, as if she had been electrocuted. What's wrong with me? Qin Lin, covered her flushed face with both hands, with a complicated expression on her face. As for the other side of the inner court, Jiling, Chu Qingqi, Yixia, and the others were a little depressed. However, the pain of these people was not even 1/10 of the pain in Mu Xingzu's heart. Because in the entire inner court, the one who had been with Yi Guqin the longest and had the closest relationship with him was Mu Xingzu. Inner court number 5 Peak, within the bamboo forest. Mu Xingzu, dressed in a light green gauze dress, was leaning against the bamboo as usual, looking up at the bamboo leaves that filled the sky. She was not old, and originally had a trace of the naivety of a young girl. But at this moment, the smile on her face was completely gone. Her bright eyes were a little red and swollen, and there was a deep sadness in them. Mu Xingzu, Ji Ling, dressed in a small green robe, walked over from nearby. She looked at Mu Xingzu with a complicated expression on her face. Mu Xingzu did not seem to hear her, and continued to stare blankly at the falling bamboo leaves. Mu Xingzu, the inner court ranking competition is in 1 day. With your current talent and strength, it will not be difficult to get a good ranking. Jiling sighed. Mu Xingzu was still speechless. After a long while, Jiling shook her head slightly and said, "If Yi Guqin was still here, he would not want to see you in such a dejected state." After saying this, Jiling turned around and left. Mu Xingzu's somewhat wooden eyes slowly turned. She took out the Aurora sword from her origin ring, and her small white hand lovingly stroked the blade. This was the mystical rune weapon that Yi Guqin had taken out from the Thousand-Sword Forest and given to her. Mu Xingzu's wooden eyes gradually revealed a bit of light. "Senior brother Yi, Xingzhu will not let you down. Xingzhu will take first place in the inner court for you. In the past, Yi Guqin had helped Mu Xingzhu take first place in the outer court. And now Mu Xingzhu also wanted to take first place in the inner court for Yi Guqin. She held the Aurora sword in her hand, and the tip of the sword swung. An incomparably vigorous wave of sword qi swept through the entire bamboo forest. At the same time, a powerful wave of soul energy also spread out. Mu Xingzhu's cultivation had reached the 5th transformation of the godly soul. Chapter 339. On this day, the atmosphere within the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was fervent. The annual inner court ranking competition was about to begin. To the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, the two most important competitions every year were the outer court and inner court ranking competitions. The outer court ranking competition was an opportunity for outer court disciples to enter the inner court. On the other hand, the inner court ranking competition was an opportunity for inner court elites to make a name for themselves. Not only that, the higher one's ranking in the inner court, the higher one's status would be, and the more cultivation resources one would obtain. Moreover, some disciples in the top 10 of the inner court even possessed various privileges. For example, ordinary inner court disciples had to go to the outer court regularly to instruct outer court disciples. However, with the rankings of Yi Guqin and the others, they could completely avoid this obligation. Therefore, under the various benefits, these inner court disciples also desperately wanted to raise their rankings. On the other hand, those disciples that were ranked at the top were trying their best to stabilize their rankings. It was precisely because of this that the inner court ranking competition was extremely exciting. Every single inner court disciple would completely erupt with their strength. Moreover, this was a great opportunity to display themselves in the eyes of the various elders and those in authority. The inner court ranking competition was located on a square in the inner court. At this moment, the enormous square that could accommodate 10,000 people was already filled with a sea of people. Numerous inner court and outer court disciples were gathered here. Generally speaking, outer court disciples weren't qualified to enter the inner court. However, during the inner court ranking competition, outer court disciples were allowed to watch the competition, and it could be considered as an opportunity for them to learn. All 5,000 outer court disciples in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were present. It was naturally impossible for them to miss such a great opportunity to watch the competition. On the other hand, those inner court disciples were all eager to fight, and their eyes revealed excitement. After the Void Sword Realm this time, many inner court disciples obtained fortuitous encounters. I wonder if I can hold on to my 13th position. Wuxia shook his head slightly in the crowd of inner court disciples. If even you can't hold on, then wouldn't I be at the bottom? Chu Qingqi sighed. If Yi Jianzong was here, I wonder where he would be? Wuxia's eyes revealed a trace of disappointment. Although he and Yi Guqin hadn't known each other for long, they were quite congenial. Sigh, if we compare Brother Yi who has consumed the mad demon burning blood pill, I'm afraid that only Bai Zichen and Yan Wushuang are able to fight with him in the inner academy. Chu Qingqi's gaze was complicated as he spoke. Bai Zichen, if it weren't for them standing by and watching, Yi Jianzong and Mu Xingzhu wouldn't have been forced into such a desperate situation. Yi Xie said coldly, "Don't say that. They're here." Chu Qingqi shook his head slightly. Not far away, a few figures calmly walked over. The person in the lead was dressed in white and looked extraordinarily handsome. It was Bai Zichen. Behind him, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Teng Jingshan, and the others walked over. It's Senior Bai Zichen. Is that Senior Brother Bai Zichen? He's so handsome. I heard that he was the one who left the mark on One Sword Cliff. That's right. I heard from the senior sisters in the inner court that the sword attack left behind by Senior Brother Bai Zichen is incomparably beautiful, causing one to shed tears. I want to experience it as well. Bai Zichen's appearance caused an uproar among the many outer academy disciples. Most of them were female disciples. Their beautiful eyes flickered with extraordinary splendor, and they wished that they could throw themselves at him. However, it was normal for them to have such thoughts. After all, regardless of appearance, strength, or the indifferent and otherworldly temperament that Bai Zichen revealed, It was fatal to these female disciples. Not to mention the female disciples of the outer court. Even some of the geniuses of the inner court cast interested gazes at Bai Zichen. They had experienced the sword mark on one sword cliff. That kind of beautiful and sorrowful state caused these female disciples to sink into it and sigh endlessly. Bai Zichen was very indifferent when he sensed the gazes gathered on him from the surroundings. A faint smile hung on the corners of his mouth. A person's death is like an extinguished lamp. There's finally no one above me that can suppress me. Bai Zichen was very happy in his heart. In the past, besides Yan Wushuang, he was practically the most eye-catching person. Bai Zichen's strength was not much weaker than Yan Wushuang's. He did not mind that Yan Wushuang was above him. However, Yi Guchen's arrival was like a shadow that covered Bai Zichen's head. Yi Guchen's reputation as the sword sect far surpassed Bai Zichen's. Only now did Bai Zichen completely heave a sigh of relief after Yi Guchen's death. The only thing he needed to do next was to win Yan Wushuang's heart. Although the sword mark on one sword cliff is extremely profound, I've already comprehended at least 30% of it. However, even if it's only 30%, it's still my trump card. Even Yan Wushuang should be unable to block this sword strike. Bai Zichen's eyes flickered as he secretly calculated in his heart. His confidence came from his comprehension of the sword mark on one sword cliff. With this move as his trump card, Bai Zichen was very confident. Just as the entire square was in an uproar, two beautiful figures arrived from afar. One was a beautiful young girl in a small green gown with a ponytail. The other was a young girl in an ice silk skirt with an indifferent and arrogant expression. It was Ji Ling and Yan Wushuang. The appearance of the two young girls caused many male disciples in the inner and outer court to be dazed. For many of the outer court disciples, it was their first time seeing the daughter of the sect master, who was rumored to possess extraordinary talent. However, the most attractive part of Yan Wushuang was not her exquisite face that contained an indifferent expression, but a pair of perfectly proportioned slender legs under the skirt. Those flawless legs that seemed to be carved from jade caused most of the male disciples to secretly swallow a mouthful of saliva. As if she felt many gazes land on her legs, Yan Wushuang's brows furrowed slightly. Humph! Following Yan Wushuang's cold snort, a powerful spiritual pressure from the 9 changes of the spirit landed on the square with a bang. Other than a few inner court disciples, most of the disciples were unable to stop themselves from retreating. There were even some outer court disciples with weaker cultivations that directly sat on the ground. Is this the strength of the number 1 in the inner court, Senior Sister Yan? Some outer court disciples revealed astonishment in their eyes. Ah, Wushuang, your temperament is still the same. Seeing Yan Wushuang's arrival, Bai Zichen's eyes lit up as he stepped forward and smiled faintly. Bai Zichen, it seems that you have gained quite a bit in the Void Sword realm this time. Yan Wushuang did not say anything about Bai Zichen calling her Wushuang. Bai Zichen's heart heated up when he saw that there was no disgust on Yan Wushuang's face. He knew that it was all because of the sword scar at the one sword cliff. That sword scar had moved Yan Wushuang, which was why she treated him specially. However, Bai Zichen did not mind. As long as he opened the heart of this young girl, he was not afraid that Yan Wushuang would not be moved by him. Just a little bit. Bai Zichen smiled warmly. Humph! Ji Ling, who was beside Yan Wushuang, revealed a disgusted expression when she heard Bai Zichen's words. She had already seen through Bai Zichen's character in the Void Sword realm. In order to not give Bai Zichen more opportunities to come into contact with Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling directly held Yan Wushuang's arm and said, Shuang, let's go over there and wait for the ranking battle to begin. Yes, Bai Zichen. I hope that you can bring me a surprise. After all, it has been a long time since I have met a worthy opponent in the same generation in the inner court. Yan Wushuang said faintly before she went to the other side with Ji Ling. Bai Zichen smiled and nodded, but there was a faint shadow in his eyes. Even Yi Guchen is not here. Ji Ling, don't tell me that you, a girl, want to obstruct me and Wushuang? Ridiculous. Bai Zichen said coldly in his heart. Chapter 340. As Yan Wushuang, Bai Zichen and the other top-ranked inner courtyard disciples arrived, The atmosphere of the entire square was also a boiling cauldron of voices, becoming more and more heated. The outer courtyard disciples and inner courtyard disciples were all gathered in one place. It was at this moment that Qing He, Gu Tua, Shi Yin and the other inner courtyard elders arrived at the same time. The inner courtyard ranking battle was more important than the outer courtyard ranking battle. Hence, all the elders who did not have important matters to attend to had come to watch the battle. At this moment, two figures walked over from the distant horizon at almost the same time. One was a white-haired old man with an unfathomable aura that was as deep as the sea. It was First Elder Qiushan. The other was a handsome middle-aged man in plain clothes. It was naturally the lightless Sword King, Feng Manlu. The faces of the inner and outer courtyard disciples flushed with excitement when they saw the arrival of the two important figures from the Sword Sect's Tower Forest. In the past, only First Elder Qiushan would come to watch the inner courtyard ranking battle. Feng Manlu, on the other hand, was a loner who spent most of his time in seclusion in the Sword Sect Tower, and did not care about worldly matters. It was rare for him to come to watch the battle. As for Sect Master Yin Chang'e, he was often away and naturally could not come. Uncle Feng, you really came. On the square, Yin Wushuang raised her head to look at Feng Manlu, her beautiful eyes flickering like stars. She believed that Feng Manlu had come to witness her strength. However, Feng Manlu, who was standing in the air, seemed to be looking into the distance with his empty black eyes. Not everyone can inherit the name of the Sword Sect. Yiguchen, are you really dead? Feng Manlu sighed inwardly. He turned to look at Qiushan, his voice as calm as water. Qiushan, congratulations on stepping into the divine dwelling stage. Feng Manlu's words immediately silenced the noisy square. Then, gaze after gaze of shock fell on Qiushan's body. What? First Elder has broken through to the divine dwelling stage. That's great. The faces of the group of disciples flushed with excitement. Even Gu Tua and the other elders were taken aback for a moment before their eyes were filled with joy. However, although Qing He and the other elders had smiles on their faces, their eyes were filled with worry. The current First Elder practically controlled the entire Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Before Qiushan broke through to the divine dwelling stage, Feng Manlu was able to keep him in check. But Qiushan had already reached the divine dwelling stage, and his strength far surpassed experts who were half a step into the divine dwelling stage. Qing He could not help but look at Feng Manlu. However, Feng Manlu's expression remained calm. Heh, I can't hide it from you, Feng Manlu. Although Qiushan's hair and beard were all white, his face was bright and his eyes were as sharp as the cold stars. He had indeed broken into the divine dwelling stage. However, Qiushan found that even though he had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, he still didn't have the slightest confidence in facing Feng Manlu. Wind-sweeping building was like a bottomless well, making it impossible for people to see through it. Feng Manlu seemed to not mind that he was once a divine dwelling stage expert as he said with a faint smile, "Our Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest has another divine dwelling stage expert. It's naturally delightful. Haha, let's hold the inner yard ranking battle first. Those little fellows are getting impatient." Qiushan took a deep look at Feng Manlu and said with a smile, "Sure." Feng Manlu nodded with a smile. There was not the slightest bit of anger between the two, but they were already fighting in secret. Qiushan secretly thought, even though I've broken through to the divine dwelling stage, I still don't have the confidence to face you. Feng Manlu, what kind of strength are you hiding with your divine dwelling broken? Qiushan wanted to completely control the entire Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, but Feng Manlu was a great obstacle. However, even though Qiushan had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, he still felt a little wary of Feng Manlu, who had comprehended the unity of man and sword. Qiushan shook his head slightly and temporarily put this matter aside. He looked towards the dense crowd below and said, "Disciples of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, the inner yard ranking battle will begin today. I hope that all the elites of the inner yard will be able to stand out." News from the disciples of the Great Desolate Mansion has come from the border of the Great Desolate Mansion. The barbarian race in the 5-element zone seems to be restless. After the inner yard ranking battle, I believe that some of you will head to the 5-element zone to fight against the totem warriors of the barbarian race, and even the chosen and saintesses. Qiu Shan's words immediately caused an uproar among the many inner and outer yard disciples below. They knew about the totem warriors of the barbarian race. As for the chosen and saintesses, they were the heaven prides of the barbarian race. In the past battles between the 7 great forces and the barbarian race, generally speaking, only the top heaven prides of the 7 great forces could contend against the chosen and saintesses of the barbarian race. For example, Xian Hao, Yan Wushuang, the Little War Emperor, LV Qinghan and others had defeated the chosen and saintesses of the barbarian race. Of course, there were also heaven prides of the 7 great forces that were killed by the chosen and saintesses. Therefore, those who rank at the top in the inner yard ranking battle will receive more rewards as preparation for heading to the 5-element zone. At the same time, the person who wins first place in the inner yard will become the leader of the disciples of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest. Qiu Shan said in a clear voice. Hearing the word leader, the eyes of all the inner yard disciples lit up. The disciples present were all hot-blooded young men and women who didn't want to become the leader and lead the inner yard of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest to fight against the chosen and saintesses of the barbarian race. Of course, many inner yard disciples also knew that the real leader could only be chosen between Yan Wushuang and Bai Zichen. If Yi Jianzong didn't die, would he have the strength to fight for the leader position? An outer yard disciple said in disappointment. This caused the surrounding people to be speechless. If Yi Jianzong is still alive, with his strength, it would be difficult for him to win without taking the elixir. Another person said. The story of Yi Guqin killing 100 people in the Void Sword realm had long been spread in the 7 great forces, and even the Saint Origin dynasty. However, everyone knew that it was because he had taken the mad demon burning blood elixir, and not Yi Guqin's strength. Even so, such a story made the blood of a group of outer yard disciples boil. They wished they could witness it with their own eyes, but obviously, they didn't think they had the chance. Before the start of the inner yard ranking battle, there's one more thing. It's the bet that Yi Guqin made with me, but he has fallen in the Void Sword realm. It's really a pity. He will always be a disciple of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest, and his venerable cave dwelling will also belong to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest. I will distribute the resources fairly, Qiu Shan said. However, right at this moment, a clear yet resolute voice suddenly resounded. I don't agree. As his words fell, the entire noisy square instantly fell into a deathly silence. It should be said that the person who reprimanded wasn't an inner yard disciple, nor an ordinary elder, but one of the 3 leaders of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest. He was also an expert of the divine dwelling stage, Qiu Shan. Even with Qiu Shan's shrewdness, his face slowly froze. A young girl in an aqua-green gauze dress held the Aurora sword in her hand. Her face, which still had a trace of a young girl's innocence, contained a hint of determination. I, Mu Xingzu, am here today on behalf of senior brother Yi Guqin. I will use my sword to ask for a battle. No one can take away the venerable cave dwelling that belongs to senior brother Yi. As Mu Xingzu's words faded, a vast spirit pressure almost uncontrollably surged out. In terms of pressure, it wasn't much weaker than Yan Wushuang. Chapter 341. Feeling the pretty girl who was emitting a terrifying soul pressure. The surrounding group of disciples were all shocked. It's this Mu Xingzu. I heard that she obtained the greatest opportunity in the Void Sword realm. Yi Jianzong sacrificed himself in the end, because he wanted to protect her. Hearing the gossip of the surrounding disciples, Mu Xingzu's face turned pale. Yi Guqin had died because of her. This was something that Mu Xingzu could never forgive herself for. Mu Xingzu, you actually dare to be so presumptuous in front of the great elder. Isn't that too outrageous? Bai Zichen took a step forward. He had the cultivation of the 8th transformation of the divine soul, so he was naturally not afraid of Mu Xingzu's pressure. That's right, Mu Xingzu. There's no room for you to be presumptuous here. Wang Xiaotian also took a step forward. Facing 2 of the top 3 in the inner yard, Mu Xingzu did not have the slightest intention of backing down. Her jade-like hand gripped the sword tightly. Qiu Shan looked deeply at Mu Xingzu. With his identity and status, it was naturally impossible for him to argue with Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu, you obtained a great opportunity in the Void Sword realm, and can be considered a genius now. Although Yi Guchen's death is regrettable, it's already in the past. You have to walk out of it. Qiu Shan did not seem to be angry at Mu Xingzu's scolding as he slowly said. Hearing Qiu Shan's words of advice, the surrounding disciples once again admired the great elder's magnanimity. Mu Xingzu, today, I will replace senior brother Yi Guchen. If I am unable to obtain the top 5 in the inner yard, not only will I unconditionally give up the Venerable One's cave, Xingzhu will also withdraw from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, and never take a step into the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest in this lifetime. It was almost the same oath as Yi Guchen that day, coming out of Mu Xingzu's mouth. Every word was powerful and resonant. At this moment, even Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian and the others were stunned, unable to speak. Mu Xingzu, you'd better think this through. Once you leave the protection of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, with the fortuitous encounter you've obtained, you'll be doomed, Qiu Shan said calmly. Great Elder, please give Xingzhu a chance. Mu Xingzu said through gritted teeth. All right, I'll grant you that. Qiu Shan flicked his sleeves. After this voice sounded, the inner academy ranking battle officially began. Mu Xingzu stepped onto an arena covered with defensive formations. An inner court disciple stood on the opposite side of the arena. Ranked 72 in the inner courtyard, Wang Dong. Junior sister Xingzhu, please. The young man was quite courteous. Mu Xingzu, ranked 98 in the inner yard. Please enlighten me. Mu Xingzu shouted. Previously, she had only challenged a disciple ranked 98th. In other words, Mu Xingzu's current ranking was the third from the bottom in the inner courtyard. From the third from the bottom to the top 5, the gap was not ordinary. However, Mu Xingzu's bright eyes did not waver at all. Whoosh! As soon as the battle began, Mu Xingzu directly slashed across the sky with her sword. The young man did not even have time to react before the sharp sword was pressed against his neck. Wang Dong's face was blank. In any case, he was ranked 72 in the inner courtyard, and had a cultivation base of the third transformation of the godly soul. However, he could not even take one slash from Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu has become so strong? In the outer courtyard crowd, Qin Lin, Er's face was filled with shock, and then a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. The young girl who could be teased by her back then had now left her far behind. All of this was because of Yi Guchen. Mu Xingzu's move had obviously shocked many people. Even Bai Zichen secretly frowned. In the next few battles, Mu Xingzu passed almost all of them. No one could withstand more than 10 moves from her. After a day of the ranking battle, Mu Xingzu, who was ranked third from the bottom, directly rose to the 52nd place. However, the most terrifying thing was that Mu Xingzu had not completely revealed her strength. In addition, Yan Wushuang, Bai Zichen and the others did not make a move. This was because their opponents had directly admitted defeat with a bitter smile before the battle had even begun. Today's ranking battle has ended. Tomorrow, the ranking battle will have its final result, an elder said loudly. Feng Manlu, who was standing alone on the crown of an ancient pine tree, had a slightly complicated expression. The person he had been waiting for did not come. Is it really a foregone conclusion? Feng Manlu shook his head and sighed. On the first day of the ranking battle in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, in the demonic beast barren valley that was hundreds of miles away from the floating mountain, the valley that was originally filled with demonic beasts was already a bloody mess. The corpses of many Class 4 demonic beasts were scattered everywhere. Many cracks appeared on the ground, and the forest was destroyed. It was as if countless battles had erupted. Rumble. The shock waves from the battle spread out like a tide. A figure with gorgeous fiery wings on his back soared into the sky. It was Yi Guchen. At this moment, his clothes were a little messy and he was panting. On the ground below him, a two-headed serpent was constantly roaring. A Class 5 demonic beast is indeed difficult to deal with. Yi Guchen was slightly panting. However, if this scene was seen by others, they would definitely be shocked speechless. An ordinary Class 5 demonic beast was comparable to a human life and death chamber expert. In other words, Yi Guchen was currently fighting with a life and death chamber expert. Fortunately, I have the vermilion bird wings. Even if I can't defeat it, I can still escape. However, this demonic beast's bloodline and demonic soul are useful to the 5-colored golden core. It seems like I can only slowly whittle it down, Yiguchen thought. Although his current strength was somewhat strong, facing a Class 5 demonic beast head-on was still a little difficult. However, Yiguchen had the vermilion bird wings and an almost inexhaustible extreme chi. Therefore, Yiguchen would exhaust this Class 5 demonic beast to death even if he had to. 10,000 deities tribulation, destruction of heaven and earth. Yiguchen's fallen star soft sword soared into the sky, and the sword wings burst out from his back again. The pair of boundless and overbearing sword wings were even more powerful than before. With a sword strike, the powerful two-headed serpent let out a mournful roar. Boom, boom, boom. It took Yiguchen a whole day to kill the strongest demonic beast in the demonic beast desolate valley. With the cultivation of Divine Soul Realm, he killed a Class 5 demonic beast that was comparable to a life and death chamber expert. Although Yiguchen had the advantage in the air, if others knew, they would definitely be incomparably surprised. After that, Yiguchen directly absorbed the two-headed serpent's bloodline and demonic soul through the 5-colored golden core. The Azure Dragon Totem, one of the 5-colored totems, had its power increased again. Of course, the two-headed serpent was slightly weaker than the black dragon python, so the energy it provided was also limited. However, Yiguchen didn't care. With such accumulation, the 5-colored totems would naturally awaken one day. I've wasted too much time. It's time to go back. That Qiushan probably can't wait to take my venerable cave mansion. Yiguchen's eyes were deep as he looked into the distance. The vermilion bird wings on his back unfolded again, and his body turned into a flaming meteor, flying towards the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Chapter 342. On the second day of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, the inner yard ranking battle began again. Although a day of intense battles had passed, the atmosphere in the square did not weaken on the second day. Instead, it showed signs of boiling. This was because on the first day, many inner yard disciples stood out and gave everyone an exciting battle. Among them, the most stunning person was naturally Mu Xingzu. Even Li Lingxiao and Wang Xiaotian were a little wary of her current strength and cultivation. On the ring, Mu Xingzu looked calm. She struck out with her sword again, and blasted an inner yard elite disciple, who was ranked 16th out of the ring. The winner is Mu Xingzu, one of the deacons announced loudly, his eyes filled with admiration. Mu Xingzu has entered the top 16. Yes, she's too strong. As long as she doesn't encounter too strong an opponent, it shouldn't be a problem for her to enter the top 10. The surrounding thousands of disciples whispered to each other with admiration in their eyes. After all, Mu Xingzu's rise could be said to be a miracle. The next battle is Mu Xingzu's battle. The deacon paused and looked at Mu Xingzu with a sigh. Battle against Bai Zichen. As soon as the deacon's words came out, it immediately caused an uproar. One was Mu Xingzu, who had obtained a great opportunity in the Void Sword realm, and showed off her abilities. The other was Bai Zichen, who firmly occupied the second place in the inner yard, and had an 8th transformation Divine Soul. This battle was extremely attractive. Even Qiushan, who was standing on the high platform in the distance, cast his gaze over. Feng Manlu, who was at the side, looked calm as if he was daydreaming and thinking about something. Junior Sister Mu, please enlighten me. Bai Zichen's feet tapped the ground lightly and landed on the ring elegantly. His tone was calm and graceful. This carefree scene caused the eyes of many female disciples to be filled with splendor. Bai Zichen. Mu Xingzu's beautiful eyes revealed a look of disgust. If you didn't stand by and do nothing, senior brother, you wouldn't have. Mu Xingzu held the Aurora sword tightly, her delicate body trembling slightly. Upon hearing Mu Xingzu's words, the noise below the stage quietened down slightly. Some of the disciples looked at Bai Zichen with strange looks in their eyes. They were from the same sect, yet they stood by and did not get involved in this matter. This was truly chilling. Previously, some of the inner domain disciples had spread the same news, saying that Bai Zichen and the others were not willing to lend a hand. Bai Zichen's eyes flickered slightly when he sensed the numerous strange gazes. He continued to smile faintly as he said, "Junior sister Mu, you probably don't know how much pressure your senior brother is under, right? That Xian Hao repeatedly said that he wanted to kill the disciples of my inner court. If it wasn't for me keeping him in check, the disciples of the inner court would have suffered heavy casualties." Bai Zichen explained with a hint of sadness on his face, as if he felt that he had not done enough. "That's right. Senior brother Bai Zichen has already done his best. Only he has the strength to keep Xian Hao in check. That's right. Senior brother Bai Zichen is considering the overall situation of the inner court. How can Mu Xingzu say that?" Some of the infatuated girls who were in love with Bai Zichen shrieked immediately. "How shameless!" Ji Ling said coldly. Yan Wushuang did not say anything. She had not witnessed it personally, and it was not appropriate for her to make rash judgments. Mu Xingzu was speechless. She had nothing to say to Bai Zichen, and could only decide the truth with their swords. Clang! The swords intersected and light flashed. Bai Zichen's sword was also a divine weapon with mystical patterns. At this moment, it was summoned and a dazzling sword light swept out in all directions. Mu Xingzu's expression was grim. Bai Zichen's strength was far from what others could compare to. Only Yan Wushuang could suppress him. Boom! Mu Xingzu no longer held back and released her soul sword intent directly. A transparent soul sword wave swept out, and even Bai Zichen's expression changed slightly. However, he still executed his sword move to defend against the soul sword intent. This did not mean that the soul sword intent was weak. Instead, this soul sword intent was directly given to Mu Xingzu by Ying Ning. It was difficult for her to completely comprehend it in a short period of time, and she could not unleash her full strength. If this Mu Xingzu's cultivation is the same as mine, then this soul sword intent can really pose a great threat to me. Bai Zichen also had some lingering fear. Fortunately, with his current cultivation level, he was still able to suppress Mu Xingzu. Originally, this move was used to suppress Wushuang. But now I'll use you to test it first. Bai Zichen thought to himself. He struck out with his sword again. As he struck out with his sword, a mysterious concept spread out. Poignant, sorrowful, moving one's expression. This is. Just as Bai Zichen executed this sword strike, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and all the inner court disciples were shocked. "You're finally willing to use this sword strike?" Yan Wushuang muttered to herself, her eyes shining brightly. Not only the inner court disciples, but even the outer court disciples could feel the faint sorrow in Bai Zichen's sword strike, even though they did not know the reason behind it. Even Qing He, Gu Tuo, Shi Yun, and the other elders were moved. They immediately stood up and carefully examined it. This was because they sensed that this was the sword strike that Bai Zichen had left behind at the solitary sword cliff. Even Qiu Shan, who was not far away, narrowed his eyes slightly. This sword intent. Feng Manlu shook his head slightly at the side. In the entire inner court, he was probably the only one who knew who had left behind the sword strike at the solitary sword cliff. This was because Feng Manlu had experienced the entire process of Yi Guqin creating this move in the infinite desolate plains. An imitation is an imitation. It only has the form, but not the intent. This sword strike has lost its soul. Feng Manlu sighed inwardly. Qiu Shan, who was beside him, also noticed some clues. However, not everyone was as knowledgeable and experienced as them. Even the inner court elders were a little confused and felt that Bai Zichen's sword strike was a little crude compared to the sword mark at the solitary sword cliff. However, they did not think too much about it. The sword strike leaving behind a mark is all about the right time, place, and people. This sword strike may not be as strong as the sword mark at the solitary sword cliff, but it also has the same intent. Elder Gu Tuo praised in a serious manner. Qing He glanced at him suspiciously. These elders all felt that there was a difference between Bai Zichen's sword strike and the sword mark at the solitary sword cliff. However, in the arena, facing Bai Zichen's sword strike, even Mu Xingzu was dazed for a moment. She was already worried, and her emotions were drawn out by this sword strike, which made her slightly stunned. However, because Bai Zichen's sword strike did not touch the essence, Mu Xingzu came to her senses in the next moment. However, Bai Zichen's sword strike was already in front of her. If Mu Xingzu relied on the indestructible soul pearl to cultivate for a while longer, and her cultivation reached the 6th transformation of the divine soul realm, she would have some confidence in dealing with Bai Zichen. However, it was still a little difficult for Mu Xingzu to defeat Bai Zichen, who was in the 8th transformation of the divine soul realm. Junior sister Mu, although you've obtained a great opportunity, let me show you what it means to say that there's always someone better than you out there. Bai Zichen's lips curled into a smile, thinking that he had already won. Senior brother Yi, is Xingzhu very useless? I can't even replace you to become the number 1 in the inner court and protect the Venerable One's cave abode. Mu Xingzu's lips curled into a bleak smile. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the outcome of this battle was already decided. This sword strike is really powerful. Mu Xingzu's defeat is not unjust. Yan Wushuang's beautiful eyes were bright, as if she could not wait to experience Bai Zichen's sword strike. However, right at this moment, a flaming ray shot over from the distant sky. It landed on the arena with a loud bang. What's going on? For a time, everyone was shocked. However, because the speed of the flame was too fast, it landed on the stage in the blink of an eye. Rumble. Dust and smoke filled the air. A fair and slender palm that was suffused with a faint azure gold luster stretched out, and it directly clamped the sword with 2 fingers. Clang. The sword stopped. It's not up to you to teach a disciple of my sword sect a lesson. A low voice was not loud, but it was like a thunderclap that resounded in everyone's ears. This voice seemed to freeze the world, causing everyone here to be deathly silent. Chapter 343. Dust filled the air above the arena. Bai Zichen's sword was caught between the 2 fingers, and was completely neutralized. Bai Zichen was stunned for a moment, as if he had yet to recover from his shock. However, in the next moment, Bai Zichen's mind seemed to have been emptied when he heard the voice. He could not think for a moment. Not only Bai Zichen, but Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Tung Jingshan, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the rest of the inner and outer court disciples felt their minds explode when they heard the voice. The owner of the voice should have died long ago, and it was impossible for him to appear here. Even someone as indifferent as Yan Wushuang's delicate face slowly froze at this moment. Her crystal eyes were filled with disbelief as if she had seen the most ridiculous thing in the world. Could it be that kid? Qing He Gu Tua, and the other elders also stood up one by one. Their eyes were wide open, and they lost their composure. On the high platform not far away, Qiu Shan's expression changed for the first time. Feng Manlu, who was at the side, had a faint smile on his face. In fact, Feng Manlu was not confident when he did not see Yi Xiwen return yesterday. However, everything was settled now. His judgment was right. At this moment, no matter what the others were feeling, the one whose emotions were fluctuating the most was Mu Xingzu. Her delicate body stiffened on the spot. Her pink lips were slightly open as if she wanted to say something, but she could not. In front of her, the dust slowly dispersed. As the dust settled, a familiar thin figure appeared in front of her eyes. The young man's spine was still as sharp as a sword. It was like a peerless sword that crossed the sky, unmoving and unwavering. Mu Xingzu's tears immediately fell uncontrollably. At this moment, all her sadness, grievances, self-blame, and regret had turned into a heart full of attachment. She cried out, "Senior brother Yi. Xingzhu, are you okay?" Yi Guchen slowly turned his face. That handsome and angular side profile was unforgettable for Mu Xingzu. Yes. Mu Xingzu nodded. Her face was full of tears. She cried and cried, but she smiled. Clang. With a flick of Yi Guchen's finger, Bai Zichen's sword was knocked away. Your imitation of this sword is too clumsy. Yi Guchen turned to Bai Zichen and shook his head slightly. No. How could this be? How could it be you? Bai Zichen was still in a daze, unable to recover from his shock. He even subconsciously ignored what Yi Guchen had said. He could not imagine how Yi Guchen had managed to survive in such a desperate situation. Maybe even the heavens can't take my life away. Yi Guchen placed his hands behind his back. Although there was no aura leaking from his body, his bearing and indifferent tone concealed a sharp edge. It was as if he didn't even put the heavens in his eyes. This was the peerless edge that belonged to the sword faction. No. Impossible. Yiguchen, you were sucked into the spatial crack. How could you still be alive? Bai Zichen shook his head and clenched his teeth. He was unwilling to believe it. Not only him, but Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others also looked as if they had seen a ghost. They could not accept that Yiguchen had appeared in front of them, alive and well. In contrast to Bai Zichen and the others, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were overjoyed. Although they could not figure out how Yiguchen had managed to survive, they were already happy that he had survived. What exactly did Yiguchen go through? Even Yan Wushuang, who was usually indifferent, had a somewhat interesting expression on her jade-like face at this moment. She turned to look at Feng Manlu, who was smiling. Her brows were tightly knitted together, and she was unwilling to accept it. Yan Wushuang finally realized that Feng Manlu was not here to pay attention to her, but to wait for Yiguchen's return. Yiguchen is lucky to have survived, but so what? If his strength is still the same as before, Yan Wushuang will not accept it. Yan Wushuang thought to herself as she clenched her fists. On the stage, Bai Zichen took a deep breath after a long time, and accepted this fact that he was unwilling to accept. During this time, Yiguchen had been standing with his hands behind his back with a calm expression. Xingzhu, thank you for your hard work. Leave the rest to me, Yiguchen said calmly. Mu Xingzhu's face, which had not shown a smile for a long time, finally revealed a bright smile. The burden in her heart had been lifted with Yiguchen's arrival. Only Yiguchen and Bai Zichen were left in the arena. Although the elders wanted to know what Yiguchen had experienced, it was still the time for the inner yard ranking battle. Yiguchen turned to Qiu Shan and said, First Elder, I will fulfill the bet we made 2 months ago today. Oh Yiguchen, you have indeed exceeded my expectations. Since you are willing, let's continue the bet. Qiu Shan took a deep look at Yiguchen. With his experience, he could naturally see that Yiguchen's strength had improved. However, from what he could sense, Yiguchen was only at the 6th transformation of the Divine Soul. Although Qiu Shan was surprised to see such a huge breakthrough in such a short time, the 6th transformation was still slightly inferior to Bai Zichen's. Yiguchen, even if you survived the disaster and had some opportunities, how strong can you be? Qiu Shan smiled faintly. Yiguchen retracted his gaze and turned to look at Bai Zichen. Yiguchen, it's good that you are here. Then fight with me. Bai Zichen held a sword in his hand, and the blade vibrated. After accepting the fact that Yiguchen was still alive, Bai Zichen quickly recovered his state of mind. Although in the Void Sword realm, Yiguchen's means of killing hundreds of people with one sword made him extremely shocked. However, Bai Zichen also subconsciously thought that it was only because of the insane demon blood ignition pill. In addition, Bai Zichen did not have Qiu Shan's realm, and could not sense Yiguchen's specific cultivation, so he still had a trace of confidence on his face. Yiguchen slowly shook his head. Yiguchen, you really don't dare? Bai Zichen said with a smile. Not only him, but Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others also smiled again, thinking that although Yiguchen survived, he was still as strong as before. As for the insane demon blood ignition pill, it was not allowed to be consumed in the ranking battle, so they were not worried. Looks like the sword sect is a little timid. That's true. It's good enough that they can survive. Why should they ask for trouble now? Some of the inner court disciples who did not like Yiguchen whispered. On the other hand, some of the inner court disciples who were loyal to Yiguchen were embarrassed. Yiguchen, you're still in the same place, but if you don't even have the courage to draw your sword, then it's too disappointing. Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly with disappointment in her beautiful eyes. However, Yiguchen, who was in the arena, smiled and shook his head. I think you've misunderstood. What I mean is, Yiguchen paused for a moment before he said, everyone in the inner court who looks down on me. Everyone who has criticized this Yi. Everyone who thinks that I'm not qualified to occupy the 5th ranking. All of you. Come at me together. Chapter 344. As soon as Yi Guchen finished speaking, the square, which had been quiet because of Yi Guchen's arrival, became so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Yi Guchen was not only challenging Bai Zichen, who was ranked second in the inner yard. Instead, he was challenging all the people who disliked Yi Guchen. Even Qing He Gu Tua and the other elders' faces froze, let alone the disciples of the inner yard. What gave Yi Guchen the confidence to say such a thing? Yi Guchen, you're lucky to have escaped death. However, do you think you can be so arrogant just because you're lucky? Even with Bai Zichen's shrewdness, he could not help but feel a little angry after hearing Yi Guchen's words. As the second in the inner yard, he had always been aloof. Apart from Yan Wushuang, no one dared to treat him casually. However, Yi Guchen's words were undoubtedly looking down on him. I think Yi Guchen is lucky to have escaped death. However, he must have damaged his brain. Wang Xiaotian sneered disdainfully. Obviously, he was mocking Yi Guchen when he was drowned in the thunder tide. Wait a moment. You can have a taste of the unusual thunder. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered as he said indifferently. Humph. Shameless boasting. Wang Xiaotian ignored him. Apart from that, Li Lingxiao, Teng Jingshan, and the others also looked displeased. In their eyes, Yi Guchen was still the same person who had lost all his genuine qi. He was not worthy of them attacking together. Even Elder Qing He, who was on the spectator stand, said kindly, Yi Guchen, you've escaped death. You should rest for a while. Obviously, Qing He was trying to give Yi Guchen a way out, so that he would not be embarrassed. As for Yan Wushuang, she'd been standing coldly since the beginning. Her jade arms were crossed before her chest, causing her ample bosom to be displayed, and her slender legs were crossed. She was sizing up Yi Guchen. At the same time, there was a hint of contempt in her beautiful eyes. Yan Wushuang did not mind if Yi Guchen was not strong enough. However, Yan Wushuang was a little disgusted by his arrogant words. Looks like Yi Guchen must be confident. Ji Ling, who was standing at the side, was more optimistic about Yi Guchen. In her heart, she had already raised Yi Guchen's strength to the same level as Yan Wushuang. Is that so? I feel that Bai Zichen, who was able to leave a mark on the one-sword cliff, will not be defeated by Yi Guchen. Yan Wushuang's tone was casual and indifferent. It was clear that she was looking down on Yi Guchen. Yan Wushuang and Yi Guchen were competitors because Yi Guchen was the successor of Feng Manlu. Naturally, she didn't have a good impression of Yi Guchen. Then let's wait and see. Ji Ling smiled, not saying anything else. Yes words. S words is a joke. Thousands of outer court disciples widened their eyes. They wanted to see with their own eyes whether Yi Guchen was boasting or not. Even some of the female disciples' eyes lit up. The domineering sword master's charm was not inferior to Bai Zichen's. This caused a group of beautiful female disciples to switch sides and side with Yi Guchen. On the stage, Bai Zichen let out a deep breath and said, Yi Guchen, there's no need for anyone else. I alone can convince you wholeheartedly so. However, Bai Zichen had not finished speaking. Yi Guchen's eyes revealed a trace of impatience. The sword in his hand trembled. Immediately, an extremely vast golden real qi burst out from Yi Guchen's body like a huge wave sweeping across the sky. The terrifying true energy fluctuation violently shook the surroundings, causing thousands of disciples to take a few steps back. It's true energy. Sword Master Yi has recovered his true energy. The terrifying true energy swept out in all directions like a tornado, causing everyone to be shocked and let out cries of disbelief. As for Bai Zichen, he was even more stunned. The words he had yet to finish were stuck in his throat. Swoosh. Yi Guchen did not waste any words and directly attacked with his sword. The sword shook the void, erupting with layers of sword wave. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 layers of sword wave superimposed together and spread towards Bai Zichen. Void sword technique, 1,000 layers of waves. The terrifying sword ripple caused the entire arena to rumble. Bai Zichen's expression changed drastically when he saw this. The terrifying golden true energy that erupted from Yi Guchen's body made him feel a trace of shock from the bottom of his heart. Cycle Tempest Sword Technique. Bai Zichen directly used a top-grade spiritual sword technique from the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. His sword aura was like a storm that swept out in all directions, blocking the incoming sword wave. From this move, it could be seen that Bai Zichen was worthy of being ranked second in the inner yard. His strength had far surpassed the ordinary inner yard elites. Not many people could withstand Bai Zichen's sword. However, for Yi Guqin, whose strength had skyrocketed, this sword technique could not pose a threat to him. Boundless Heaven Sword Technique, Inescapable Net. Yi Guqin's sword cut through the void, interweaving in a mysterious trajectory. In the end, it seemed to form a vast sword net that gathered the terrifying sword chi storm within it. Yi Guqin used the shadow step. His figure pulled out an afterimage as he swept towards Bai Zichen. It's the Blood Tower Sword Technique. Because it was not the first time Yi Guqin used it, Bai Zichen also saw it. He hurriedly turned around to prevent Yi Guqin from sneaking an attack from behind. However, whoosh! The sharp sword light pulled out an afterimage, like a ray of light in the dark night. Shadow Kill Sword Technique, Vanishing Shadow. Yi Guqin did not use an instant kill, but a frontal attack. The sword light tore through the void and was extremely powerful. Yi Guqin, you're messing with me. Bai Zichen's expression changed abruptly, and he hurriedly blocked with his sword. Clang! Bai Zichen felt a terrifying power coming from the tip of the sword, causing his heart to tremble. Then his body uncontrollably retreated backward, and his arms were severely numb. Yi Guqin raised his other hand, and his true chi flowed through his meridians. Then, rays of sword chi shot towards Bai Zichen. 6 Pulse Divine Sword activate. After breaking through to the Divine Soul realm, and gaining the ability to condense true chi, the 6 Pulse Divine Sword's power had increased greatly. The might of the 6 Pulse Divine Sword also soared. Streaks of finger glints tore through the air like flying swords as they flew towards Lin Fan with deadly force. You've broken through to the Divine Soul realm. Bai Zichen's expression changed again, as if he had seen an unbelievable scene. Yi Guqin might have had a fortuitous encounter to recover his true chi, but his cultivation had skyrocketed to the Divine Soul realm. Moreover, Bai Zichen could feel that Yi Guqin's spirit power was not weaker than his. In other words, at least Yi Guqin's current cultivation was not weaker than his. This not only shocked Bai Zichen, but Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others below the arena were also stunned, as if they had been struck by lightning. As for the inner yard disciples, they looked as if they had seen a ghost. On the contrary, the inner yard disciples who were loyal to Yi Guqin were excited. The sword master in their hearts had finally recovered his strength. The king had returned and feared nothing. Shuang, it looks like your formidable opponent has appeared this time. Jiling giggled. Is that so? I hope he won't disappoint me. Although Yan Wushuang said this, her jade-like hands slowly clenched. Obviously, her current state of mind was not as calm as she appeared on the surface. Chapter 345. In the arena, Bai Zichen was in a slightly sorry state. His clothes had been cut by the 6 Pulse Godly Sword, causing blood to spurt out of his wounds. Of course, in the inner court ranking battle, injuries were allowed, but life and death were not allowed. Many disciples looked at Yi Guqin, who was standing there with a calm expression on his face. They turned to look at Bai Zichen, who was in a sorry state. Some disciples secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Although the dust hadn't settled on the battle yet, some clues could already be seen. With senior brother Bai Zichen's cultivation and strength, he actually can't compare to Sword Sect Yi. Some inner court disciples' voices were a little dry, and they had a clearer understanding of Yi Guqin's strength. On the spectator stand, Gu Tuo's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Bai Zichen was a genius of their Grand Elders faction. But now, he was actually suppressed to such an extent. Yi Guqin's sudden increase in strength shocked Gu Tuo. All of you, come at me together. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. Yi Guqin's tone was calm, as if he was talking about something ordinary. Yi Guqin, don't think that you can be so overbearing just because you've recovered your strength. Bai Zichen could no longer maintain his composure, and his face was slightly distorted. Overbearing? Isn't that your most normal attitude? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows slightly. Ever since he came to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest, he had never wanted to provoke others. He only wanted to cultivate quietly. However, he was not affected by the storm, but the storm affected him. Bai Zichen, Yan Wushuang, and the others all looked down at him with a high and mighty attitude. If it was an ordinary person, they would not be able to accept it. Although Yi Guchen did not mind this, it did not mean that he could endure being looked down upon all the time. And now, Yi Guchen had recovered his strength. He also wanted to take advantage of this inner court ranking battle to completely suppress all the injustice. Only by truly revealing his thunderous methods could he avoid trouble. Even Grand Elder Qiushan and the others would not dare to go too far because they were worried about his talent and strength. This was Yi Guchen's plan. You're not convinced? I'll beat you until you're convinced. Since that's the case, don't blame me for not giving you any face. Within Yi Guchen's body, the power of thunder burst forth. Purple lightning wrapped around the blade of the meteor flexible sword. Because the purple void profound lightning was very powerful, Yi Guchen was afraid that he would accidentally kill Bai Zichen. So he only split out the purple lightning nether lightning. Although this was the case, the purple lightning nether lightning was still a strange lightning of the heavens and earth. Furthermore, it carried a cold yin qi, and its power was also extremely strong. Whoosh! Yi Guchen used the linear lightning sword that he had not used in a long time. With a thunderclap, purple lightning illuminated the sky, bringing with it a powerful thunderous fluctuation. It crashed down on Bai Zichen. Clear void swordsmanship. True energy erupted from Bai Zichen's body, and the soul fluctuations of the 8th divine soul transformation suddenly spread out. He wanted to use his soul power to shake Yi Guchen's sea of consciousness. Yi Guchen merely smiled faintly in the face of Bai Zichen's attack. Although he was 2 minor realms lower than Bai Zichen, the power of his spirit was not the slightest bit weaker. Not to mention that there was a spirit creature like the meteorite demonic soul butterfly in his sea of consciousness. Yi Guchen directly ignored Bai Zichen's soul attack, and his sword momentum did not stop, setting off a thunderclap. How is this possible? Bai Zichen's expression changed abruptly. After his spirit creature blasted into Yi Guchen's sea of consciousness, it did not cause the slightest ripple. If one could look into Yi Guchen's sea of consciousness at this moment, they would see. The meteorite demonic soul butterfly slightly flapped its wings, spreading out a circle of dazzling star-like translucent light shield that enveloped the entire sea of consciousness. The spirit creature's power could not shake Yi Guchen's sea of consciousness at all. When the elders saw this scene, they were all astonished. Their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Could it be that Yi Guchen has a spirit creature guarding his sea of consciousness? Elder Qing, he could not hide his surprise. How is this possible? How could that kid have such a great opportunity? Gu Tuo's expression was also extremely ugly. A spirit creature guarding the sea of consciousness was extremely rare. Even elders like them did not have many spirit creatures. As long as they had a spirit creature, they would almost never be at a disadvantage in a spirit creature battle. Boom. In the arena, sword light surged and thunder exploded. That purple lightning spread out in all directions. If not for the array around the arena blocking, many of the surrounding disciples would have been affected. But even so, those disciples watching the battle in the surroundings could also clearly feel the terror of that lightning. Spurt. Bai Zichen's figure retreated again, and a mouthful of blood could not help but overflow from the corner of his mouth. His arm was also somewhat charred, and at the same time, it felt somewhat numb. That was the cold attribute of the purple lightning nether lightning, which made his arm extremely stiff and numb. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed, and without the slightest hesitation, he attacked again. As long as he blasted Bai Zichen out of the arena, everything would be over. However, at the same time Yi Guchen attacked with his sword. A sword light suddenly attacked from the side. It was Wang Xiaotian. He held the dragon sword in his hand, and performed the spirit-level soaring dragon sword technique. The vast sword light was like a golden dragon, and it bombarded Yi Guchen. You finally made your move? Yi Guchen smiled faintly. A vicious blood-colored energy spread toward the meteorite soft sword. Yi Guchen swung his sword horizontally, and a blood-colored sword light collided with the golden sword chi. God-slaying sword technique, blood slaughter. Bang! On the other side, Li Lingxiao also rose into the air and attacked with his sword. They all knew that if they did not defeat Yi Guchen today, they would never have the chance to do so again. Moreover, according to the bet between Yi Guchen and Xiao Shan, as long as they could defeat Yi Guchen in this battle, Yi Guchen would lose the qualification to compete for the 5th place in the inner yard. He would also have to hand over the Honorable Realm Cave and leave the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Yi Guchen, you're indeed powerful after recovering your strength. However, if you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too arrogant. Li Lingxiao's sword fell like a storm. Yi Guchen, you'll definitely lose today. Tung Jingshan also jumped into the arena. It was as if a slight change in one part of the body would affect the whole body. One after another, more than 10 inner yard disciples jumped into the arena. Among them, the weakest was at the 4th transformation of the Divine Soul Realm. There were also many 5th transformation and 6th transformation. The 5,000 Outer Academy disciples were all stunned when they saw so many people swarming onto the fighting ring in unison. The arena competition had always been fair, and it was a one-on-one battle. However, more than 10 inner yard elites, including Bai Zichen and Wang Xiaotian, who were in the top 3, were challenging one person at the same time. This shocking feeling caused the faces of these disciples to turn red. They could not take their eyes off the arena, and the blood in their veins was boiling. One person challenging a group of inner yard elites. How domineering was that? They're really doing such a shameful thing. Jiling curled her lips and said, Yi Guchen was too arrogant previously. Even I might not be able to retreat safely from such a lineup. Yin Wushuang shook her head slightly. Obviously, she thought that Yi Guchen was too arrogant. Although Yi Guchen has recovered his strength, he's still so arrogant. I'd like to see how he's going to deal with this. Elder Gu Tua snorted from the spectator stand. However, Elder Qing he had a faint smile on his face. He had always admired Yi Guchen. A true sword cultivator should be like this, showing off his ability. Chapter 346. Yi Guchen's figure was as proud as a pine tree, tall and tough. Facing a group of inner court disciples, including Bai Zichen and Wang Xiaotian, who were in the top 3, there was not a trace of fear on his face. Instead, there was even a trace of battle lust. Yi Guchen had just broken through. Although he had used some demonic beasts to train his strength, demonic beasts and humans could not be compared. Yi Guchen also wanted to know how strong he could be, and this battle was undoubtedly a very good touchstone. Yi Guchen used wave-like subtle steps and swept forward with the meteorite soft sword in his hand. Go, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others rushed out with their swords. As for Bai Zichen, his face was extremely ugly, but he had to admit that Yi Guchen's current strength had skyrocketed to the point that even he was shocked and could not suppress it. Damn it! Bai Zichen gritted his teeth and could no longer maintain his composure. In fact, the fact that he wasn't cursing out loud right now was already enough of a forbearing attitude. But even so, the veins on his forehead were still bulging and throbbing. Since I can't defeat you, it's enough to chase you out of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Bai Zichen took a deep breath and stopped thinking about it. Right now he only had one goal, and that was to unite everyone's strength to defeat Yi Guchen, and make him leave the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. At least out of sight, out of mind. Bai Zichen used the Cycle Tempest sword technique again. The fierce sword chi swept out like a storm and spread out. Facing the siege of everyone, Yi Guchen's expression did not change. In his body, the ultimate sea of chi was spinning wildly, and the vigorous golden true chi was like a huge wave that rumbled out. Luotian protection. After his genuine chi was restored, Yi Guchen was able to use all kinds of techniques. Golden true chi rose around Yi Guchen and turned into the Guardian Vajra's shadow. With Yi Guchen's current strength of the Divine Soul 6th transformation, it was enough for him to completely use this spiritual defensive martial art to the extreme. The Guardian Vajra's shadow seemed to be cast from gold and iron, and it had a sense of hardness. No, it could not even be called a shadow, but an existence that seemed to have substance. Clang, clang, clang. Some disciples at the 4th or 5th transformation, divine soul transformation, used their sword skills. As they fell upon the guardian Vajra, it emitted a series of thunderous ringing sounds. However, none of these sword techniques could break through the guardian Vajra. Yi Guchen brushed his finger across the blade, and a drop of blood flowed out. God-slaying sword technique, Soul Demon. Yi Guchen's aura changed abruptly as if he had been possessed by a demon. The blood-red sword light tore through the sky and shot towards Bai Zichen's sword Qi storm. Boom. The sword Qi collided, and a shockwave swept out in all directions, shaking the surrounding defensive formations. On the side, Wang Xiaotian and Li Lingxiao once again executed their sword techniques, attacking Yi Guchen from both sides. Soaring Dragon Sword Technique, Dragon Soul Howl. Wang Xiaotian let out a long shout, true Qi bursting out. At the same time, he activated the Spirit Pattern Array on the Dragon Song sword, making the sword even more powerful. The surging sword force seemed to erupt with a dragon's roar, and it even had the effect of shaking one's mind. From this sword, one could see that Wang Xiaotian's ranking as the 3rd in the inner yard was not an exaggeration. The reason why he was so miserable at the hands of the Divine Condor was because of the Blood Cloud Centipede's suppression. Lingxiao Sword Technique. On the other side, Li Lingxiao also attacked with his sword. The sword light seemed to pierce through the 9 heavens as it flew through the air, producing an ear-piercing explosion. Although he was weaker than Wang Xiaotian, he was still the 6th in the inner yard, and he had the cultivation of the Divine Soul 5th transformation. He was not weak. Seeing that the two of them were attacking him from both sides, Yi Guchen executed the rippling wave and moved his feet. The sword in his hand flashed with blood-red light as he executed the 3rd move of the God-slaying sword technique, Yellow Spring. The surging river of blood collided with Wang Xiaotian's soaring dragon sword technique, causing endless waves to erupt. Almost at the same time, Yi Guchen's sword force suddenly changed. The tip of his sword drew a circle, as if forming a yin-yang wuji pattern. Li Lingxiao's sword force fell into it like a clay ox entering the sea, swallowing it without a trace. Even Li Lingxiao was taken aback for a moment. In the next moment, Yi Guchen used the force of the force to reflect the sword force. With Yi Guchen's mastery of the Taiji sword technique, it was enough to reflect 100% of the force. Boom! Li Lingxiao suddenly retreated, spitting out blood. The surrounding inner yard elites took advantage of this moment to attack with their swords. Yi Guchen executed the rippling wave subtle steps, and was as agile as a fish among the thousands of swords. The blades of the disciples could not even touch the corner of his clothes. Whoosh! The sound of the blade piercing through the air rang out. Bai Zichen's sword suddenly pierced through the chaotic swords. It had to be said that the timing was very good. Even Ji Ling and the others, who were watching the battle from the sidelines, didn't notice this sudden sword strike. However, Yi Guchen's expression was very calm. He had already spread out his divine soul perception and sensed Bai Zichen's attack. Clang! Yi Guchen blocked it with his sword, and violent sparks flew everywhere. Whoosh! Yi Guchen activated the purple lightning nether thunder in his body again. The surging purple lightning directly burst out and swept in all directions. Many people were sent flying while vomiting blood. Yi Guchen's attack alone blasted 4 or 5 inner yard disciples out of the arena. Even Bai Zichen had to retreat again, using his true qi to block the lightning attack. I didn't expect that not only did you not die, but you also refined such a strange lightning. Bai Zichen and the others' faces were somewhat gloomy. They were not confident in Yi Guchen's endless tricks. All of you, show me your true strength. If that's all, you'll disappoint me. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. He wanted to use this battle to test his strength and cultivation. However, until now, Yi Guchen had not really used much of his strength. Ji Ling and the others were almost petrified when they heard Yi Guchen's words. They had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen such an arrogant person. Mu Xingzu's face revealed a smile, and her eyes curved into crescents. This was the Yi Guchen in her heart, who was invincible. I'd like to see how capable Yi Guchen is. Yan Wushuang's face was still indifferent, but her beautiful eyes were even more focused as she stared at the battle. Yi Guchen, you're really infuriating. Even Bai Zichen could not hide the anger in his heart. At this moment, his handsome face was flushed red. That's the truth, Yi Guchen replied indifferently. He would never exaggerate. He would only speak the truth. Well then, Yi Guchen, don't lose too miserably. The true qi in Bai Zichen's body vibrated, and circles of air waves spread out. He attacked again, and almost all the true qi in his body gathered on the blade of the sword. When the sword swept out, the air exploded. It's one of the king-level sword arts of the Sword Sect's Tower Forest, Origin Sword Art. Many Inner Yard disciples exclaimed from below. Only the Inner Yard disciples were qualified to know and come into contact with the king-level sword art. When the Outer Yard disciples heard about the king-level sword art, their eyes widened in shock. However, the king-level sword art was notoriously difficult to cultivate. Therefore, even with Bai Zichen's talent, he was not even close to the initial level. Even so, its power was far beyond the spiritual level sword art. Heaven-shaking sword art. Wang Xiaotian's sword vibrated as he attacked at the same time. It was another lower king-level sword art. In addition, Li Lingxiao, Teng Jingshan, and the others also displayed their trump cards. Although it was not a king-level sword art, the power of the sword qi was still shocking. Some of the other disciples who were participating in the battle also attacked at the same time. At this moment, all the spectating disciples, the Inner Yard elders, and even Qiu Shan and Feng Manlu were paying close attention. What was Yi Guchen's true strength? This is interesting. Yi Guchen smiled and his sword qi soared into the sky. Behind him, a blood-red shadow soared into the air, bringing with it an extremely murderous aura. This is the sword art that senior brother Yi Guchen displayed, the one that killed 100 people with one strike. Some of the Inner Yard disciples exclaimed in shock. The fifth move of the god-slaying sword art, Yama. When Yi Guchen attacked with his sword, the blood-red Yama shadow behind him also attacked with its sword at the same time. Boom! The blood-red sword qi surged out in all directions and collided with Bai Zichen, and the other's ultimate move. Under the strong impact, a clear cracking sound was heard. This is. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yi Guchen's sword. The fallen star soft sword was covered with cracks. Under this extreme impact, the soft meteor sword shattered with a loud bang. Chapter 347. Although the meteorite soft sword was a premium divine weapon forged by Yi Guchen with 100,000 refinement stones, it was still a divine weapon. After all, it was made of heavenly silk steel, which was used to forge spiritual inscription divine weapons. The swords of Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the rest were all mystical inscription divine weapons. Under the impact of such a powerful move, the meteorite soft sword was already under great pressure. Now that Yi Guchen had infused his vital energy into it, it had far exceeded the burden of the sword. With all these factors added together, the meteorite soft sword that had accompanied Yi Guchen for a long time finally could not withstand the pressure, and suddenly shattered. As the broken sword fragments scattered in all directions, Yi Guchen's figure suddenly retreated. Ha! Yi Guchen, this is the price of your arrogance. The eyes of Bai Zichen and the rest instantly lit up. How could they not grasp such an opportunity? Swoosh! 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 Numerous sharp swords pierced through the air. Yi Guchen, who had lost the meteorite soft sword, instantly fell into a difficult situation. It's one thing for a group of people to besiege him, but they actually bullied the sword master for not having a sword. That's too shameless. Not to mention the disciples who supported Yi Guchen. Even some of the female disciples who sided with Bai Zichen blushed. They felt that Bai Zichen's actions were not honorable. The Inner Yard disciples who supported Bai Zichen and Wang Xiaotian also lowered their heads. They felt that it was too embarrassing. Such a ridiculous scene actually appeared in the Inner Yard ranking battle. Elder Qing He, who was in the spectator stands, looked displeased. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame Yi Guchen for being overconfident. It's fine to teach him a lesson. Gu Tuo chuckled. Obviously, he thought that the outcome was already decided. If Bai Zichen and the rest still could not defeat Yi Guchen under such circumstances, then Gu Tuo would have nothing to say. In the distance, Qiu Shan smiled faintly and said, Feng Manlu, you should have sensed Yi Guchen's current situation. Aren't you worried at all? Feng Manlu shook his head and said with a smile, True gold fears no fire. Yi Guchen was able to solve that dead-end situation, so how could he not be able to solve this problem? You have an inexplicable confidence in Yi Guchen, Qiu Shan said meaningfully. Because he's a sword master, Feng Manlu said leisurely. When Qiu Shan heard this, his pupils unconsciously constricted. The title of sword master was not groundless. It involved many great secrets that ordinary people did not know. It was even to the extent that being able to obtain the title of sword master itself represented a type of karmic luck. Of course, this sort of thing was too profound and had a deeper meaning, so ordinary people would naturally not know about it. In the arena, Yi Guchen, who had been dominating all four sides, was now in a slightly passive position. After all, a sword cultivator focused on the sword. Even though Yi Guchen still had his previous state of mind, he did not have the strength to transform anything into a sword. However, Yi Guchen's current strength was no longer the same as before. Although he was in a passive position, he was not pressured to the point that he could not breathe. Yi Guchen used wave-like subtle steps and moved around. At the same time, he raised his hand and an extremely vigorous true energy condensed into a golden longsword in the blink of an eye. When this scene fell into the eyes of everyone, they were all shocked. The degree of solidification that was as if it was real was generally only achievable by experts in the 9 changes of the divine soul. Therefore, in the eyes of everyone now, Yi Guchen's current strength was no weaker than a genius in the 9 changes of the divine soul. Clang! The sword condensed from Yi Guchen's true energy collided with Wang Xiaoyan's dragon cry sword, and dissipated in an instant. However, in the next moment, Yi Guchen instantly condensed another sword and continued to fight. How high is Swordmaster Yes Qi Si? Many people were shocked speechless when they saw this scene. Condensing true energy required a large amount of true energy. Even an expert in the 9 changes of the divine soul could not condense true energy into weapons all the time because that would consume too much energy. However, Yi Guchen's situation was something that no one expected. The limit of 100,000 feet in Qi Si allowed Yi Guchen's true energy to almost never dry up. Clang! 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 Yi Guchen used his true energy to sweep the golden sword in all directions. With each collision, the sword shattered. However, after the sword shattered, another sword was formed. This method caused the elders on the viewing platform to be speechless as their mouths hung wide open. At this moment, Yi Guchen grasped his qi and formed it into a sword. After the sword was released, the sword shattered. After the sword was destroyed, the sword condensed. Just like this, Yi Guchen relied on his true energy to display his swordsmanship to the point of perfection, and swept the surroundings. Condensing true energy into a sword and using sword qi to move. This Yi Guchen. Even Qiu Shan sighed. He had never seen such a genius in the sword Dao. Boom. With another explosion, Yi Guchen's figure retreated more than 10 steps. On the stage opposite him, there were less than 7 people left, including Bai Zichen. Yi Guchen, without a sword, how long can you last? Bai Zichen and the others were also injured, but in their opinion, Yi Guchen would definitely not be able to last. Yi Guchen shook his head and smiled faintly. As a sword cultivator, I have the heart of the sword. Why should I worry about not having a sword? Oh, then where is your sword? Bai Zichen held the hilt of his sword and exchanged glances with Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others. Their eyes flickered with a dark light. They were going to use their full strength to launch their final attack and completely defeat Yi Guchen. Where is my sword? Yi Guchen was still smiling faintly. He slowly raised his hand. In an instant, the noisy square quieted down. 5,000 outer court disciples, many inner court disciples, Yan Wushuang, Jiling, and the elders in the stands, including Qiu Shan and Feng Manlu, were all watching. What was Yi Guchen trying to do? Yi Guchen, what are you trying to do? Bai Zichen vaguely felt that something was wrong. Yi Guchen did not answer but closed his eyes. Boom. With the first sound, Yi Guchen released his heart of the sword intent. Boom. With the second sound, Yi Guchen's hard and soft sword intent spread out. Boom. With the third sound, the Shura sword intent gushed out like a blood-red tornado, piercing through heaven and earth. Boom. With the fourth sound, Yi Guqin's sea of consciousness surged, and an incomparably turbulent spirit power spread out with a loud bang. The heart of the sword, the dual sword intent, and the spirit power almost merged into one in an instant, emitting a fluctuation in all directions. This fluctuation spread out of the square, and spread throughout the inner court. For a moment, heaven and earth rumbled, and Yi Guqin's sword intent soared into the sky, shaking the surroundings. This powerful sword intent caused Bai Zichen and the others to reveal astonished expressions. This aura pressured them to the point that it was difficult to breathe. Sword come. Yi Guqin let out a long howl that swept through the Sword Whisper mountain range. Inner court, forest of 10,000 swords. This place was also affected by Yi Guqin's sword intent, and the long swords were trembling violently. Clang. The first long sword that was stabbed into the ground was pulled out of thin air, and then it flew back into the sky. Then the second one. The third one. In the end, a series of long swords swept back into the sky in unison. Even the few rare mystical inscription weapons in the depths of the forest of 10,000 swords trembled with a clang and soared into the sky. In the end, on the mound, the Xianming heavy sword that Yi Guqin had not pulled out before also seemed to be resonating, and it shook with a loud bang, accompanied by an explosive sound that pierced through metal and cracked stone. The mound exploded with a bang. The Xianming heavy sword soared through the sky, causing space to tremble, and the ground to crack because of this trembling force. Clang, clang, clang. With the Xianming heavy sword in the lead, all the famous swords in the forest of 10,000 swords soared into the sky, transforming into a sword river that covered the sky and covered the sun. This sword river caused heaven and earth to lose its color. It caused the sun and moon to lose their light. All because Yi Guqin of the sword sect said, "Sword come." They were all inspired and soared into the sky. On this day, the sword sect pagoda forest shook, and the Sword Whisper mountain range rumbled. All because 10,000 swords returned to sect. Chapter 348. In the forest of 10,000 swords, a sword river formed by 10,000 swords blotted out the sky. Everyone in the square felt as if the world had darkened. It was as if the radiance of the celestial emperor's sword had been temporarily obscured. What's going on? Everyone was puzzled. Then, rumble. The entire Sword Whisper mountain range trembled, and a terrifying sword intent seemed to fill the world. What's going on? On the stage, the hearts of Bai Zichen and the others sank. They really felt that the situation wasn't good. Then Bai Zichen and the others saw the vast river of swords in the distant sky, obscuring all light. More than 10,000 famous swords gathered together, like a dragon sword soaring across the sky. Not only Bai Zichen and the others, but also the 5,000 outer courtyard disciples, many inner courtyard disciples and elders. Even Qiushan's eyes were filled with shock. To make a shrewd divine dwelling expert lose his composure, one could see how shocked he was. Sword sect, sect of 10,000 swords. Although Feng Manlu couldn't see the shocking scene, he could still feel it. At this moment, he muttered in a low voice, confirming that Yi Guqin was indeed worthy of the name of sword sect. At this moment, everyone in the sword sect forest of towers raised their heads, speechless shock on their faces. They had seen a scene that they would never forget in their lives. 10,000 flying swords soared into the sky. Just because of one sentence. Swords come. At this moment on the stage, except for Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian and Li Lingxiao, the remaining inner courtyard disciples couldn't help but fall to the ground with trembling legs. Even Teng Jingshan, who previously despised Yi Guqin, collapsed to the ground without a care for his image. His face was pale, and cold sweat rolled down his face. He stared at the sword river in the sky with his mouth wide open. Clatter. The sword river circled above Yi Guqin, colliding with each other, producing countless crisp sounds of metal colliding. Yi Guqin still maintained his posture with his hand raised. Then he clenched his fist. Boom. Amidst the spiraling sword river, a heavy sword smashed down like a meteor from outer space. Bang. With a sound that caused the earth to tremble. The heavy sword stabbed into the ground in front of Yi Guqin. The stage, which was engraved with a defensive array, cracked and shattered under the roar. Profound practitioners were the heavens, while the underworld was the earth. Xianming, the meaning of this word was to describe the heavens and earth. This heavy sword seemed to bear the weight of the heavens and earth. Don't you have a sword now? Yi Guqin smiled indifferently and reached out his hand to grab the hilt of the Xianming heavy sword. Boom! Yi Guqin unleashed the full power of his Sea of Qi. The Xianming heavy sword buzzed and trembled. It was extremely heavy, and if it was an ordinary person, not to mention using it, it was hard to say if they could even pick it up. Boom! Yi Guqin's draconic elephant force erupted as the Xianming heavy sword was slowly pulled out by Yi Guqin. Rise! Yi Guqin immediately activated the half-transformed flawless Vajra body. A huge force erupted once again. Bang! The Xianming heavy sword was finally held in Yi Guqin's hand. Yi Guqin could only feel that his Sea of Qi and Sea of Consciousness were under great pressure. This sword actually has such an ability? Yi Guqin was surprised. If it was an ordinary person's Sea of Qi and Sea of Consciousness, they wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure and exhaustion from the Xianming heavy sword. However, Yi Guqin was an exception. Now Yi Guqin held the Xianming heavy sword in his hand. His figure was like a towering mountain that made people look up to him. Above his head, tens of thousands of long swords were suspended in the air like coiling dragons. Sword Qi soared into the sky. This scene was unforgettable for everyone present. Even Yan Wushuang didn't realize that her usually indifferent face was filled with unconcealable astonishment. All along, she had been ranked first in the inner yard and could be said to be invincible. But now, Yi Guqin had commanded the 10,000 swords to return to their origin with a single word. Such boldness and such ability caused Yan Wushuang to unconsciously feel a trace of unwillingness in the bottom of her heart. She even felt ashamed of her inferiority. How is this possible? Even if his cultivation has recovered, it's still impossible. Yan Wushuang's face was slightly pale as she clenched her teeth tightly. Her stubbornness and pride didn't allow her to feel inferior. Yi Guqin, you and I will fight. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath as her full chest rose and fell. As for Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Mu Xingzu, and the others, they were already stunned and immersed in the sword concept. In the arena, Bai Zichen and the others' hands were trembling slightly as they held their swords. Now let's fight again. Yi Guqin didn't want to delay any longer. His true qi and soul power had been greatly exhausted. He held the Xianming heavy sword in his hand. Although it was his first time using this sword, he didn't feel unfamiliar with it at all. In fact, he even felt a trace of familiarity with it. This was because he had used the Xianming heavy sword before. The heavy sword had no edge and it was too skillful. I surrender. Tung Jingshan and the others immediately opened their mouths and rolled down the arena like rolling gourds. Their faces were covered in dirt, and they didn't have the slightest image. They were really afraid of Yi Guqin. Not to mention the terrifying heavy sword. Just the sword river that was hovering in the air was enough to make them tremble in fear. Bastard! Bai Zichen's emotions were pushed to the limit. He didn't care about his image and cursed loudly. Then he attacked again with his sword. The sword light condensed at one point and pierced through the air towards Yi Guqin. Wang Xiaotian and Li Lingxiao also unleashed their respective sword techniques and charged forward. Yi Guqin swung the Xianming heavy sword in his hand and performed the void sword technique, 1,000-layered waves. However, the 1,000-layered waves performed by the Xianming heavy sword was even more powerful. The void shook violently and the ground cracked at the same time. The terrifying sword wave seemed to be strengthened as it swept towards Bai Zichen and the others. Bang! 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 3 extremely loud collision sounds were heard. Wang Xiaotian and Li Lingxiao were blasted dozens of feet away. They collapsed on the ground and spat out blood. Bai Zichen only retreated 100 feet, but he let out a muffled groan as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Yi Guqin, why did you come back? Bai Zichen smiled bitterly and shook his head. Let's decide it with one move. Yi Guqin didn't want to say more. Bai Zichen took a deep breath, and there was a hint of madness in his eyes. He gathered his true qi and soul power and stabbed out with his sword. It was a sword technique that imitated the one-sword cliff's emotion. Sigh. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. He pointed the Xianming heavy sword in his hand, and the soul power in his sea of consciousness shook violently. In the sky, the 10,000 flying swords whistled through the air, transforming into a river of swords that whizzed towards Bai Zichen. The 10,000 flying swords together was a magnificent sight. Just as the collision was about to happen, a figure intervened between the two. It was the first elder, Qiushan. Qiushan stretched out his hand and made a grasping motion in the air. Terrifying waves of true qi spread out and froze the sword river. However, to everyone's horror, Qiushan was also forced to take a step back by the sword river. Although it was only one step. But Qiushan was an expert of the divine dwelling stage. For a moment, everyone was dumbstruck and speechless. First elder. Bai Zichen's face turned ugly. He never thought that there would be a day where he would need Qiushan to save him. Yi Guchen's expression was indifferent. He wasn't angered by Qiushan's intervention, and just quietly observed the situation. Yi Guchen wins this battle. Qiushan took a deep look at Yi Guchen and said in a rare serious tone. Chapter 349. Qiushan's words directly decided the outcome of the battle. First elder why? Bai Zichen gritted his teeth, extremely unwilling to accept the result. You can't take this move. Qiushan shook his head. With a wave of his hand, the 10,000 swords left Yi Guchen's control and flew back into the forest of 10,000 swords. Yi Guchen frowned when he saw this scene. A divine dwelling expert was indeed not just for show. Yi Guchen, you've won the bet. Qiushan's tone was indifferent. Given his cultivation level, he could naturally tell who was stronger between Yi Guchen and Bai Zichen. The reason why Qiushan acted was because he did not want his disciples to lose too miserably and embarrass themselves. As for Yi Guchen, even though he hadn't entered the top 5 in succession, based on his current results, no one in the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest doubted his strength. Yi Guchen, according to the oath, you will receive a king-level sword art from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. You can also become the inner court leader like Yan Wushuang. Qiushan said indifferently. Given his identity as the first elder, he could not refuse the result of the bet. First elder, there's no need for the sword art. I only want the Xianming heavy sword. As for the leader position, I don't care, said Yi Guchen. Since you have the ability to use the sword, then so be it. Qiushan waved his hand, as if unwilling to say anything more. However, at this moment, a delicate voice sounded. Yi Guchen, what do you think the leader position is? The person who spoke was Yan Wushuang. Yi Guchen frowned slightly but did not say anything. He was a loner and was not good at leading others, so he did not have any thoughts about the leader position. As for Yan Wushuang, to be honest, Yi Guchen did not have a good impression of her. He did not have any relationship with Yan Wushuang. It was only because he was the successor of Feng Manlu that Yan Wushuang had some opinions about him. Yi Guchen didn't want to pay attention to her, but before setting off for the Void Sword Realm, Yi Guchen was a little impatient with her attitude and cold words. Therefore, Yi Guchen naturally did not want to answer Yan Wushuang's question. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave, Yi Guchen said. As long as Yi Guchen was able to secure the 5th spot, and the Martial Highness cave abode was not taken away, it was enough for him. Wait! Yan Wushuang spoke again. Yi Guchen did not stop walking. Stop! Yan Wushuang shouted again. Yi Guchen continued to ignore him. All the disciples who saw this scene were speechless. As expected of Sect Master Yi, he can actually ignore senior sister Yan. That's right. If it were me, I would even be willing to lick senior sister Yan's boots. Some male disciples whispered to each other. TSK. That's why I said that you are ordinary people. Senior brother Yi is a real sword cultivator. He won't be swayed by women. Some female disciples stared at Yi Guchen with bright eyes. The gazes that were originally focused on Bai Zichen were now focused on Yi Guchen. Feeling the whispers and discussions around her, even Yan Wushuang felt her cheeks burning. She had lost face. Stop right there. Yan Wushuang pushed off the ground and soared into the air. She landed in front of Yi Guchen. Her straight legs were crossed, and the ice silk skirt fitted the young lady's graceful curves. It was quite moving. However, the girl's face was cold and she was biting her red lips. What's the matter? Yi Guchen raised his eyelids slightly. The number one in the inner yard has not been decided yet. Yan Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands. I'm not interested in the number one. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. But I want to fight you, Yan Wushuang said stubbornly. If you want to be number one, then take it, Yi Guchen said coldly. With his temperament, he wasn't interested in fighting for the number one position. As for the position of leader, he was even less interested. This was because the leader was going to unify the inner yard and fight the barbarian race's saints and saintesses. Yi Guchen's goal was to go to the land of 5 elements to find the sacred herb to save Su Jianshi. Therefore, Yi Guchen had no intention of becoming number one and the leader. Are you afraid? Yan Wushuang shouted with a threatening gaze. Yi Guchen paused and said indifferently, Your provocation is a little clumsy. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath and turned to look at Feng Manlu, who was not far away, and said, Uncle Feng, Wushuang requests to fight with Yi Guchen today. If I lose, Wushuang has nothing to say. Yan Wushuang's voice spread throughout the area. Everyone, including Ji Ling and the others, was shocked. This was the first time they saw Yan Wushuang issue a challenge in such a serious tone. Before this, Yan Wushuang had swept through everyone in the inner yard. There was no opponent at all. Even Bai Zichen rarely fought with Yan Wushuang. But now Bai Zichen and the others weren't Yi Guchen's match even if they joined forces. Yan Wushuang naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Not far away, Feng Manlu pondered for a moment and said, Yi Guchen, you fight with Wushuang. Yi Guchen's eyes dimmed and he nodded. Since Senior Feng says so, then let's do it. Yi Guchen changed his mind. It would be good if he could use this battle to deal with Yan Wushuang. Hearing these words, the eyes of everyone present once again revealed an excited expression. Yi Guchen's myriad returning swords had already shocked them and broadened their horizons. Now Yan Wushuang, who had been number one in the inner yard for a long time, was going to fight with Yi Guchen. Everyone was looking forward to it. Yi Guchen, you must be exhausted after the battle just now. I, Yan Wushuang, won't take advantage of you. Let's be decisive and decide the winner in one move. What do you think? Yan Wushuang said coldly. Sure. Yi Guchen nodded. The two of them switched to another arena because the arena from before had long been destroyed beyond recognition. Yan Wushuang and Yi Guchen stepped into the arena at the same time. The atmosphere was strange. At this point, the inner yard ranking battle had almost become Yi Guchen's stage. Now everyone only wanted to know if Yi Guchen's strength could be compared to a top genius like Yan Wushuang. Yi Guchen, I have to admit that I underestimated you back then. However, I won't give up the identity of Uncle Feng's successor. Yan Wushuang slowly drew her sword and said, If Yan Wushuang still dared to underestimate Yi Guchen, then she was really overestimating herself. Yan Wushuang also knew that Yi Guchen was no longer the person who she had underestimated, and whose genuine qi had been destroyed. Yan Wushuang, do you still remember what you said to me before we went to the Void Sword Realm? Yi Guchen suddenly asked. Yan Wushuang's face froze. She remembered what she said to Yi Guchen back then, and found it difficult to say it. I said at that time that I would return the words that you said to me. Yi Guchen said slowly. Yi Guchen, the outcome hasn't been decided yet. Are you so confident? Yan Wushuang couldn't bear it anymore. Although Yi Guchen was strong, she didn't think that she was weak. Come on. Yi Guchen shook his head and didn't say anything else. He put away the Xianming heavy sword and grabbed at the void. A long sword formed by golden genuine qi appeared in his hand. Yi Guchen, you are too arrogant. Yan Wushuang frowned and said, That's enough. Yi Guchen's sword shook and the void trembled. Humph. Yan Wushuang snorted and brandished her long sword. The aura of the 9 changes of the divine soul gushed out. The fluctuation was extremely shocking. At the same time, Yan Wushuang released a mysterious essence, which shocked everyone present again. It's sword essence. Someone growled. Because the outcome would be decided in one move, Yan Wushuang also released her sword essence. At the same time, she displayed a king-level swordsmanship. Wind sword essence? Feeling the agile and elegant sword essence, Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Lone wind sword chant. Yan Wushuang brandished her sword and the sword chi swept out like a wind dragon. With the support of the wind sword essence, the power of the sword was even more shocking. Bai Zichen and the others knew that they would not be able to block this move. This was because the power of a king-level swordsmanship and sword essence was too terrifying. However, in the face of this sword, Yi Guqin was very calm. Regardless of whether it was the fifth move of the god-slaying swordsmanship or the thousand deities tribulation swordsmanship, they could block this sword. However, Yi Guqin did not want to use it. He wanted to give it a try after his cultivation had broken through and his soul power was added. He wanted to see how powerful the sword he created would be. This move of Yan Wushuang's was precisely the best touching stone. Yi Guqin closed his eyes. Just when everyone, including Yan Wushuang, was surprised, Yi Guqin brandished his sword. This sword was not as murderous as the god-slaying swordsmanship's Yama. It was also not as spectacular as the sect-returning swords. However, when this sword strike appeared, it caused the expressions of everyone present to completely change. Yan Wushuang's beautiful eyes suddenly froze. Chapter 350. Yi Guqin's sword was not fast. In fact, it could even be said to be somewhat slow. The crowd could even see the golden sword edge slowly cutting through the air. Compared to the previous sharp sword moves, it was much more gentle. It could be said to be gentle. However, when Yi Guqin performed this gentle sword move, a sorrowful and beautiful sword intent spread out. This intent spread out of the arena and spread to the entire square, causing everyone's mind to be touched instantly. Even the elders were not surprised. Some of the sorrow of their youth appeared in their minds. However, after they experienced this concept, all the inner court students that had comprehended the sword mark on one sword cliff stood blankly on the spot. This sword move? No way could it be. Some inner court disciples muttered to themselves with shock in their eyes, as if they could not believe it. Bai Zichen, who was in a sorry state, stood below the arena with dust all over his face. When he felt this sword move, his mind instantly buzzed, as if 100,000 thunderbolts had struck his mind at the same time, causing his body to stiffen in an instant, and his face to become numb in an instant. This intent. Bai Zichen was dumbfounded, and his lips were trembling slightly. He was the first person to experience this intent at one sword cliff, and he had comprehended it many times after that, so he was naturally more familiar with this intent. However, when he saw Yi Guqin perform this sword move, he could not believe his eyes. He had always thought that the sword scar was left by some expert. He even thought that it might be left by Feng Manlu. Therefore, Bai Zichen did not dare to admit that it was left by him. However, he did not refute the rumors. In the eyes of others, this was tacit agreement. After that, Bai Zichen did not see Feng Manlu and the others say anything, so he calmed down and calmly accepted the admiration and praise of everyone in the inner court. Even Yan Wushuang, who was like a flower on top of a mountain, treated him differently. However, when Yi Guqin performed this sword move, Bai Zichen's thoughts completely short-circuited. Today, Yi Guqin had brought him too many surprises. The shock he had brought him was too much. Why is it you again? Blood trickled down from the corner of Bai Zichen's mouth. However, the other people who were affected by Yi Guqin's sword were completely immersed in it. Only the elders and some inner courtyard disciples were able to maintain a certain level of clarity. Yi Guqin's sword and that sword cliff. Jilingyu covered her red lips with her hand. The shock that Yi Guqin brought to her today had made her somewhat numb. So that's how it is. Mu Xingzu's small mouth also formed a no shape. Back then, she had been hesitant to tell Yi Guqin that someone had left a mark on solitary sword cliff, fearing that it would hurt his pride. But looking at it now, Mu Xingzu suddenly realized that she was really a little stupid back then. As for Gu Tuo and the others from the First Elders faction, their expressions were extremely interesting. They were unwilling to admit that Yi Guqin's sword move was the same as the one on solitary sword cliff. However, anyone with a discerning eye could feel that Yi Guqin's sword move was exactly the same as the sword mark on solitary sword cliff. Compared to Yi Guqin's sword move, the sword move that Bai Zichen had performed earlier was so clumsy that it was like a child imitating a painting. It was crooked and crooked. Elder Gu Tuo he. Qing He snorted meaningfully. Gu Tuo's face alternated between green and white. He naturally knew that Qing He's words were mocking him for defending Bai Zichen earlier, saying that he needed the right time, place, and people. In the end, it did not take long for him to be slapped in the face, causing Gu Tuo's face to burn. He could not help but look at Bai Zichen with a hint of anger in his eyes. However, everyone present was not as shocked as Yi Guqin, who was facing Yan Wushuang head-on. When Yi Guqin closed his eyes and drew his sword earlier, Yan Wushuang's eyes were still cold. She thought that Yi Guqin was being conceited, and did not take her seriously. However, when Yi Guqin drew his sword, Yan Wushuang's expression almost instantly froze. She was no stranger to this sword concept. This was because Yan Wushuang had repeatedly gone to one sword cliff to experience the poignant yet sorrowful concept. No matter what, she was still a young girl. Even if she was a young girl, it was difficult for her to resist this touching sword concept. After learning that the sword at one sword cliff was left behind by Bai Zichen, Yan Wushuang had to admit that she did view Bai Zichen in a new light. She even had a trace of admiration for him. However, when Yi Guqin drew his sword, the entire truth was revealed. It's you? It's you. It's actually you. Yan Wushuang did not know what she was feeling. She repeated it 3 times. This 360-degree change caused her mind to go blank for a moment. Yi Guqin, is this your revenge against me? Yan Wushuang's expression changed. Her gaze was incomparably complicated. When the two sword moves collided, there was no earth-shattering explosion. There was only silence. This move, Pathos of Heaven, directly and silently tore apart Yan Wushuang's attack. When Yi Guqin created this move, his qi was sealed. Therefore, the true power of the Pathos of Heaven could not be unleashed. However, now that Yi Guqin had broken through to the 6th transformation of the Divine Soul Realm, and could use his soul power, the Pathos of Heaven could be unleashed to its full potential. This sword contained a soul attack. If it wasn't for the spiritual item protecting Yan Wushuang's sea of consciousness, she would have fallen into some kind of illusion like the many spectating disciples. However, even with the spiritual item protecting her, Yan Wushuang still felt that her mind was in a mess. In the end, countless figures turned into Yi Guqin's sword. Yan Wushuang's sword move was broken. She could only watch as Yi Guqin's golden sword pointed at her chest. I'm really stupid, Yan Wushuang thought to herself. When she met Yi Guqin for the first time, she had questioned Yi Guqin's strength. Yi Guqin did not refute at all, which made Yan Wushuang think that Yi Guqin was jealous of Bai Zichen. However, it was clear who was the villain now. At this moment, the spectating disciples came to their senses one after another. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. There were even female disciples who were immersed in this state and shed tears. Senior Sister Yan will be severely injured if this sword slashes down, an inner court disciple exclaimed. Yi Guqin's golden sword was already in front of Yan Wushuang. However, since Yan Wushuang's first move was broken, she did not plan to use a second move. This was because she had already lost. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Guqin's sword pointed at Yan Wushuang's chest. Yan Wushuang bit her red lips. Her gaze was complicated, but she was still stubborn. However, the injury that she imagined did not come. The golden sword was formed by true energy. The moment it touched Yan Wushuang's chest, it shattered and turned into dazzling golden light spots that filled the sky. These light spots were like fireflies that filled the sky. It was extremely beautiful. Coupled with the remnant sword concept, it was so beautiful that it made people want to cry. Yan Wushuang seemed to be stunned for a moment. Her jade-like body stiffened. Yi Guqin's straight body, handsome face, and golden fireflies that filled the sky made him look like a sword celestial in a painting. Yi Guqin's calm voice came out from his mouth. It's important to know one's own limits. I'll return the words that you said that day. When Yan Wushuang heard this, her face turned pale and her body trembled. This sentence was even more hurtful than the sword. Chapter 351. The battle had come to an end without any suspense. Yi Guchen, the creator of this move, was shocked by the power of this sword move. It was enough to become one of his trump cards. Moreover, this sword move was even more powerful to those who had been in love, because such people would fall into the illusion of this sword move even more. Yan Wushuang and Yi Guchen stood opposite each other on the arena. Golden light scattered in all directions. The young girl and the young man looked as beautiful as a painting. However, the atmosphere between the two of them was slightly oppressive amidst such a gorgeous scene. Yan Wushuang gritted her teeth and said, "Tell me, were you the one who left a mark on Solitary Sword Cliff?" Although this was already an obvious answer, Yan Wushuang still wanted to hear it with her own ears. "Yes," Yi Guchen said indifferently. Although Yan Wushuang was prepared, her delicate body still trembled when she heard this, and her face turned pale. "So you've been watching me make a fool of myself behind my back?" Yan Wushuang shook her head. Her lips were as pale as paper, and her mind was like a ball of paste. The only sword move that had touched her was actually left behind by the youth in front of her, whom she disliked. This contrast and change made it difficult for Yan Wushuang, who had always been indifferent, to maintain her indifference. And the words "it's important to know one's own limits" pierced her heart like a sword. Back then, she had said this to Yi Guchen in an arrogant and cold tone. At that time, Yi Guchen had said that he would definitely return it untouched in the future. Now, Yi Guchen had fulfilled his promise, but Yan Wushuang had experienced indescribable humiliation. As the proud daughter of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest, she had never been in such a sorry state. "If I explained that day, would you believe me?" Yi Guchen shook his head indifferently. Yan Wushuang was stunned, and then she seemed to be even more ashamed. It was indeed as Yi Guchen said. If at that time, Yi Guchen refuted, Yan Wushuang would definitely not believe him. Instead, she would think that Yi Guchen was a hypocrite. But now the truth was revealed. This result caused Yan Wushuang to feel embarrassed. "Now Yan Wushuang, our battle is over," Yi Guchen said indifferently. Since Yan Wushuang wanted a result, Yi Guchen would give her one, although she might not be willing to accept this result. Hearing this, Yan Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands tightly. At this moment, her pride, her stubbornness, seemed to have shattered to pieces. Wushuang. Not far away, Jiling's beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she looked at Yan Wushuang. Yan Wushuang's tightly clenched hands were already dripping with blood. She bit her lip and said in a trembling voice, "Yi Guchen, in any case, I'm already an arrogant and condescending person in your eyes, right?" Yi Guchen raised his eyelids slightly, but did not comment. "Ah. If that's the case, please forgive Wushuang for being unreasonable." "I, Yan Wushuang, am still not convinced," Yan Wushuang shouted. The persistence and stubbornness in her heart did not allow her to succumb here. "Your persistence has nothing to do with me." Yi Guchen's tone was indifferent. "Not long from now, the Sword Sect Pagoda will be opened. Wushuang wants to compete with you again. Let's see who can ascend higher. Otherwise, I won't be convinced." Yan Wushuang's face was pale, and he seemed to be forcing the words out of his mouth. Actually, she had already lost, but she was not willing to give up the opportunity to become the successor of Feng Manlu. Therefore, even if she was unreasonable, she still wanted to compete with Yi Guchen in the Sword Sect Pagoda again. Yi Guchen glanced at Yan Wushuang. It had to be said that although he did not like this woman, her stubbornness and persistence were rare even among men. "I originally planned to challenge the Sword Sect Pagoda. Since you want to challenge me, then I will accept it." Yi Guchen did not mind. If Yan Wushuang insisted on competing with him like this, then there was nothing he could do. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left, no longer paying attention to Yan Wushuang. When the disciples heard this, their eyes were filled with curiosity again. They also wanted to know if Yi Guchen, who had created many miracles, could create another miracle in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Looking at Yi Guchen's back, Yan Wushuang bit her red lips so hard that a trace of blood seeped out. Since she was young, she had been at the top of everyone, but because of Yi Guchen, she had fallen to the bottom of the valley for the first time. Yi Guchen. Yan Wushuang's expression was extremely complicated, and she had mixed feelings. The inner yard ranking battle ended amidst everyone's exclamations and shock. In this battle, the most eye-catching person was Yi Guqin. The shock he brought was far greater than the sum of everyone else's. In the end, even Qiushan could only temporarily give up on the Honorable Realm's cave. Although Yi Guqin did not mind, he was already ranked first in the inner yard. At the same time, he was also a leader like Yan Wushuang. As for Bai Zichen and the others, they were rather ashamed. Especially Bai Zichen, although he had previously admitted that he was the one who left a mark on One Sword Cliff. However, his silence meant that he had tacitly agreed. In the end, Yi Guqin's sword had revealed the truth. In an instant, many disciples in the inner yard cast disdainful and doubtful gazes at him. He, who was the one who was infatuated with Bai Zichen earlier. Some male disciples teased. Stop talking. The female disciples who were infatuated with Bai Zichen earlier all blushed in embarrassment, feeling that they had misjudged him. Facing this, although Bai Zichen's expression changed, he could still endure it. However, the only thing that he could not tolerate was Yan Wushuang's attitude towards him. Her beautiful eyes were filled with extreme indifference and coldness. With her personality, she hated being lied to the most. If it was before One Sword Cliff, although Yan Wushuang did not treat Bai Zichen differently, she still slightly acknowledged him. But now, Yan Wushuang could be said to be completely disgusted with Bai Zichen, and there was no room for negotiation. Looking at Yan Wushuang's indifferent gaze, the bitterness in Bai Zichen's mouth was so strong that it could not be dispersed. He revealed a bitter smile, and was in a daze. He no longer had the elegant and outstanding feeling from before. One could imagine that Bai Zichen's reputation in the inner yard would be very bad in the future, and he would be in an extremely embarrassing position. Even Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao and the others' gazes changed when they looked at Bai Zichen, becoming a little distant. However, no matter what, they knew that Yi Guqin was now like the sun in the sky in the Sword Sect's pagoda forest, and he was no longer someone that they could deal with. Even Gu Tuo and the other elders had received Qiushan's order to not target Yi Guqin for the time being. It could be said that Yi Guqin had completely established his position in the Sword Sect's pagoda forest. In addition, with Feng Manlu behind him, Yi Guqin had truly gained a firm foothold. After the ranking battle, Qiushan and Feng Manlu had both asked all the disciples not to spread news of Yi Guqin's return for the time being. Everyone was well aware of the situation when they thought about it. In the Void Sword realm, other than the 9 Profound Sect, Consonance Palace, Zither Fairy and the other forces had suffered great losses. Especially the 3 Imperial Palaces, all the geniuses, including Little Flame Emperor Ji Yan, had died. If Yi Guqin had died and they couldn't find anyone to settle this score, it would be fine. However, if they knew that Yi Guqin was still alive, no force would let it go. Moreover, Yi Guqin still had such talent and strength now, and he would be a thorn in the side of the other forces. Therefore, the news of Yi Guqin's return was tightly sealed in the Sword Sect's pagoda forest and did not spread out. However, everyone knew that this was just an extra time to prepare. In the future, the news that Yi Guqin was still alive would definitely spread out. However, Yi Guqin was not afraid of those worries. He had gone through many life and death situations. What Yi Guqin was thinking about now was the Sword Sect pagoda. Chapter 352. For some reason, Yi Guqin felt that the Sword Sect pagoda had something to do with the mysterious Sword Sect. It wasn't just because the Sword Sect pagoda had the Sword Sect's ultimate technique, the reincarnation Sword Lotus. It was also because no one had ever entered the 9th floor of the Sword Sect pagoda. Even Feng Manlu and the other 2 Sword Sect pagoda forest experts could only enter the 8th level. Therefore, Yi Guqin guessed that he should be able to find some clues about the Sword Sect pagoda's 9th floor. Yi Guqin had always been wary of the 8th generation Sword Sect master, Yi Tianxing. Perhaps it was because Yi Tianxing was too strong, so strong that it exceeded his understanding. Even Feng Manlu and the others couldn't be compared to Yi Tianxing. As for Yi Tianxing's arrangements in the South Horizon region, he had bestowed the 9th generation Sword Sect Master Echelon to let the geniuses compete with each other. Was the meaning behind all of this really just to determine the 9th-generation sword sect master? Yi Guchen didn't want to speculate, but he was still a little wary. But no matter what, the most important thing was still strength. If Yi Guchen had Yi Tianxing's strength, then nothing could stop him. Although my cultivation has increased greatly, I'm still like an ant in the eyes of some experts, Yi Guchen thought. His current goal was to reach the 9 soul transformations as soon as possible, and then break through the life and death threshold. However, the life and death threshold was a great realm and a great threshold. It wasn't that easy to break through. In addition to accumulating a foundation, one also needed to rely on the opportunity of life and death. Otherwise, Yan Wushuang, Xian Hao, and the other top geniuses wouldn't be stuck at the 9 soul transformations. If Yi Guchen wanted to catch up to Gu Xiaoyang, he had to break through the life and death threshold. After all, the true geniuses in the South Horizon region were at least at the life and death threshold. The South Horizon region? I'll definitely go there soon. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He hadn't forgotten the blood feud between him and Gu Xiaoyang. It wasn't just the enmity of Su Jianshi's sword, but also his innate ability and innate sword embryo. Yi Guchen would get his revenge one day. However, before leaving the Saint Origin dynasty, Yi Guchen still needed to head to the land of 5 elements to look for sage herbs. At the same time, Yi Guchen did not forget about the primordial sword token he had obtained previously. There were clues about the primordial sword hidden within it. Yi Guchen would only leave after these matters were resolved. Just as Yi Guchen was deep in thought, Mu Xingzu's voice came from outside the door. "Come in," Yi Guchen said. Mu Xingzu entered the room. Her face was a little unnatural, and her eyes seemed to be a little red, as if she had just cried. What happened? Looking at Mu Xingzu's expression, Yi Guchen raised his eyelids slightly. In the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, there shouldn't be anyone who dared to bully Mu Xingzu. Moreover, Mu Xingzu wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. Senior brother Yi Xingzhu. As Mu Xingzu spoke, her eyes became misty again. What's wrong? Yi Guchen laughed and shook his head. It's my decision to let Xingzhu follow me to cultivate. At this moment, the heavenly sea spirit essence pendant on Mu Xingzu's neck flashed. A semi-illusory figure in a blue dress appeared. It was Ying Ning. Senior Ying Ning. Yi Guchen nodded in greeting. This sect is too small and has limited resources. It's not good for Xingzhu's growth, so I've decided to let Xingzhu cultivate alone. On one hand, she can improve quickly, and on the other hand, she can search for information about Sky Mountain, Ying Ning said lightly. I see. That's a good thing, Yi Guchen said. But senior brother Yi, I don't know how long Xingzhu will be gone this time. If it's time. Mu Xingzhu began to choke with sobs as she pouted. She's very attached to you, Ying Ning said. You will never be able to grow if you are under the protection of others. Xingzhu, you have such an opportunity. Your future is bound to be vast. If you continue to stay here, you will be trapped, Yi Guchen said. But Xingzhu wants to be with senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzhu said while biting her lip. Yi Guchen sighed softly and said, Xingzhu, what do you think of my improvement in cultivation? Mu Xingzhu was stunned and immediately said, It's very fast. Senior brother Yi is a genius. Xingzhu naturally can't compare to you. That's right. I'll leave this place in the future and head to a wider place. If you want to keep up with me, you'll have to become stronger. With Senior Ying Ning's guidance, the speed of your improvement won't be slow, Yi Guchen advised. Mu Xingzu's expression changed. After a long time, she nodded slightly as if she had exhausted all her strength. This was because Mu Xingzhu had promised Ying Ning that she would take her to find her lover. That's enough. As for leaving the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, I'll explain it to Senior Feng. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. Ying Ning stared at Yi Guchen with her beautiful eyes and suddenly said, Yi Guchen, I'm actually very curious. What's your background? Ying Ning's curiosity came from Yi Guchen's temperament. It was too similar to her lover from 1,000 years ago. Yi Guchen was stunned and said, Actually, I don't know where I'm from. I'm just a foster child in Saint Origin Empire. What's the cultivation technique you're practicing? Ying Ning asked. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed slightly. He did not tell her about his 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. Instead, he took out the golden sword vein that he had cultivated from the Universal Sword Codex. When she saw the golden sword vein that appeared on the surface of Yi Guchen's body, Ning's eyes suddenly trembled. Senior. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. It's the same. Yi Guchen, is the cultivation technique you're practicing from the Universal Sword Codex? Ning's voice trembled slightly. Indeed. Could it be? Yi Guchen was also surprised. That's right. He also has the Universal Sword Codex, Ning said. Yi Guchen's mind jolted, and he suddenly understood. Sky Mountain. Where is Sky Mountain? Yi Guchen was a little lost. What was the relationship between his father, mother, and Aunt Xian Su, whom he had never met before, and Sky Mountain? However, no matter how hard he thought about it, Yi Guchen could not figure it out for the time being. No matter what, I'll travel with Xingzhu while looking for information about Sky Mountain, Ning said. Yi Guchen nodded. He could not leave Saint Origin Empire for the time being. However, Yi Guchen was getting more and more curious about Sky Mountain. In the future, after Yi Guchen left Saint Origin Empire, he would definitely look for information about Sky Mountain. In the past few days, Ji Ling and the others also knew that Mu Xingzu was about to leave. With Feng Manlu taking care of her, no one dared to make things difficult for Mu Xingzu. Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the others even prepared a banquet and invited Yi Guchen and Mu Xingzu to join them. At the banquet, everyone toasted each other. Even Yi Guchen, who did not like crowds, was forced to drink 2 cups of wine. Yi Guchen didn't resist it too much. After all, he needed to relax his tense nerves after a series of deadly encounters and big battles. Brother Yi, there are 2 reasons why the sect hasn't spread the news that you're still alive. One reason is to make preparations, and the other reason is probably because of the exchange between the 7 great forces. Chu Qingqi said as he drank. Exchange? Yi Guchen was puzzled. It's a meeting held by the 7 superpowers before they face off against the Land of 5 Elements barbarian tribe. The real top geniuses of the 7 superpowers will all be present, Chu Qingqi said. Chapter 353. Subsequently, Yi Guchen also understood. Every year, the barbarian race would wage war, and the 7 major forces would assist the Saint Yuan dynasty to resist the invasion of the barbarian race. There were even people from the 7 major forces stationed at the Great Wall of the Great Wasteland Mansion. The so-called exchange meet was naturally a game between the 7 major forces. In every exchange meet, the top geniuses of the 7 major forces would compete. Those top geniuses were all the leaders of the major forces without exception. The purpose of the exchange meet was to mobilize before the war. The other purpose was that the winner of the exchange meet had the right to allocate the battle zone. What do you mean by allocation of battle zones? Yi Guchen was puzzled. There are many barbarian races in the 5 Elements land. Not only the 5 Elements barbarian race, there are also the Thunder race, Wind race, Bone barbarian race, Blood barbarian race, and other races. Different battle zones have different barbarian races. For example, the 8,000 miles Flaming Mountain is the base of the Fire race. The Thunder Mountain is the base of the Thunder race. In the previous exchange meet, the winner was Xian Hao from the Limitless Sword Sect. He assigned a group of people from the Sword Sect Talon to carry out a mission between the Flaming Mountain and the Thunder Mountain. The Fire race and the Thunder race are known for their violent temperament and extreme methods. Therefore, the Inner Yard suffered a great loss in the last barbarian race war. Many elite disciples died tragically in the hands of the barbarian race. Chu Qingqi's tone was a little gloomy. I see. Yi Guchen finally understood. The winner of the exchange meet had the right to assign the battle zones. The Limitless Sword Sect and the Sword Sect Talon had a grudge against each other. Xian Hao would naturally assign the Inner Yard disciples to the most dangerous areas, so that they could exhaust their strength. The Limitless Sword Sect would be assigned to a slightly safer area. This was a tacit rule. After all, it was based on one's true strength. Now Yi Guchen understood why Yin Wushuang had such a personality. In addition to being strong, she was probably under a lot of pressure. After all, In the entire inner yard, she was the only one who could be considered a top genius. Bai Zichen was, at most, half a top-notch prodigy. As for the limitless sword sect, Yi Guchen concluded that other than Xian Hao, there were definitely other geniuses. Even if they were slightly weaker than Xian Hao, they wouldn't be too much weaker. As for the saber-sealing monarch palace, other than demonic saber Lung Ju, they also had a prime sovereign. Their strength was immeasurable. Looks like this exchange is also a silent battlefield. Yi Guchen shook his head. Indeed. That's why the sect doesn't want the news of you being alive to be leaked. They want to use you as a trump card. Chu Qingqi analyzed. I don't mind, Yi Guchen said calmly. As a disciple of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, he still had to fulfill his duty. However, he was also interested in the other top geniuses of the Seven Forces. At the same time, Yi Guchen was also very curious. How would Xian Hao feel when he saw him alive and well again? The banquet lasted for an entire night before it ended. After the banquet ended, Mu Xingzu asked faintly, Senior Brother Yi, can you accompany Xingzhu to a place? Yi Guchen nodded slightly. They arrived at a bamboo forest. It was also in this bamboo forest that Yi Guchen began to teach Mu Xingzu for the first time. Mu Xingzu raised her head and watched the bamboo leaves fall faintly. A trace of nostalgia and sadness appeared on her pure and beautiful face. After a long silence, Mu Xingzu mustered up her courage and asked, If Xingzhu leaves, will Senior Brother Yi miss me? Yi Guchen was taken aback. His expression remained silent. Just as Mu Xingzu revealed a slightly bitter smile, Yi Guchen said indifferently, Yes. Mu Xingzu's expression froze. Soon after, an extremely dazzling smile bloomed on her face. Xingzhu will also miss Senior Brother Yi. Mu Xingzu shouted shyly. Then she turned around and ran away. Faint tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. However, Yi Guchen sighed softly. It's good that she leaves. A lonely star, a lonely star. It's not necessarily a good thing for her to stay by my side. Yi Guchen's eyes were deep as he sighed inwardly. He thought of Situ Hongxue and Su Jianshi. It seemed that the women who stayed by his side would experience tragedy. Perhaps this was the meaning of this name. A lonely star, destined to be lonely. However, in the next moment, Yi Guchen sighed softly and smiled. He was a sword master, a sword devil. His life was a sword. Why should he care about feelings and sorrows? Let's start cultivating. After the Sword Sect Pagoda, it's about time to explore the Five Elements land. Yi Guchen thought about his next arrangements. However, just as the entire Sword Sect Pagoda fell into a short period of peace, a change occurred far away at the Great Wall of the Great Desolate Mansion. Thunder Fire Valley was located at the periphery of the Five Elements land. It was the intersection of the Thunder Mountain Range and the 8,000-mile Flaming Mountain Range. At this moment, a few young disciples with long swords on their backs were stationed at the periphery of Thunder Fire Valley. They were bored to death. When can we return to the Great Wall of the Desolate Border? We've been stationed here for almost half a month. A young man complained. Everyone, keep your spirits up. During this period of time, those guys from the Fire Tribe and the Thunder Tribe are not peaceful. It seems like a war is about to break out. I hope we can survive until the change of guard. Another tall and thin young man sighed. They were all disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, and had been stationed at the Great Wall of the Desolate Border for a long time. The Great Wall of the Desolate Border was jointly guarded by the Seven Great Powers and the Saint Origin dynasty to prevent the barbarian tribe from invading. The Seven Great Powers were assigned to different battlefields. Thunderfire Valley was the place where the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda were stationed. Recently, many of our senior and junior brothers have died. A pretty girl said with red eyes. Just bear with it. The tall and thin young man sighed. However, at this moment, there seemed to be a change in the valley not far away. A tiger's roar reverberated in all directions. What's going on? All the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda were on high alert. Just at this moment, a flaming arrow shot towards the group of Sword Sect Pagoda Forest disciples. That kind of terrifying power could instantly pierce through the true chi defense of a fifth transformation divine soul realm expert. Puchi. Under the rain of flaming arrows, many disciples of the sword sect pagoda were directly penetrated and fell to the ground dead. Enemy attack, retreat! The tall and thin young man roared. At this moment, a shadow covered his body. It was a giant red tiger. On top of the giant tiger sat a tall and strong man. The man's skin was dark yellow and there was a ferocious tiger totem on his chest. It carried the aura of a fire totem. His eyes seemed to be spewing flames as he held a giant axe in his hand. Retreat, it's the fire tribe's holy son Yan Xiao. The tall and thin young man's expression changed drastically. They had been stationed here for a long time, and naturally knew some of the famous people of the fire tribe. The man riding the giant red tiger was one of the fire tribe's holy sons, Yan Xiao. The tiger totem on his chest was also one of the fire tribe's supreme totems, the heavenly demonic flaming tiger. Haha, sword sect pagoda, just a bunch of trash. Except for Yan Wushuang, none of you can fight. You will all become the fire demon tiger's food. Yan Xiao revealed a cruel and cold smile. He swung his axe with the power of the totem, and directly split the tall and thin young man in front of him in half. Blood flowed out. Not far away, the delicate girl's mind buzzed and she was a little dazed. Roar! Yan Zhao's mount, the fire demon demonic tiger, swallowed the young man's corpse in one gulp. TSK, such a cute girl. Yan Zhao's eyes revealed a cruel look as he walked towards the frightened girl. At this moment, a flaming ray directly pierced the girl's forehead. Not far away, on the other side, a woman with a voluptuous figure in a beast skin skirt was looking at her fingers. She was the one who shot out the flaming ray. Huomei, what are you doing? Yan Xiao showed a displeased look. Haha, nothing. But if you delay Brother Yan Xuanji's mission, you can't bear the responsibility, the woman called Huomei said. Yan Xuanji. Hearing this name, even the holy son, Yan Xiao, showed a wary look. It was because Yan Xuanji was a peerless genius with the wind and fire dual totems. He was known as the Double Crown King. Brother Yan Xuanji, you should know that if you offend him, even if you are a holy son, you won't have a good ending, Huomei sneered. Humph, isn't it just dual totems? Although Yan Xiao said so, there was a wary look in his eyes. TSK, are you jealous of Brother Yan Xuanji's talent? With 2 supreme totems, he can be called the Double Crown King. With 3 totems, he can be called the Triple Crown King. Back then, there was also a peerless king with 5 totems. Moreover, all 5 totems were primogenitor level totems, Huomei said with a respectful look. Are you talking about that king? Didn't he go missing a long time ago? I heard that 5-element temple sent down an oracle because they predicted that the sacred 5-crown king would appear in this war. When he said this, even Yan Xiao could not help but exclaim in surprise. The 5-crown king was a legend of the 5 elements barbarian tribe, and was respected by everyone. However, after that, there hadn't been a 5-crown king in the barbarian tribe for a long time. Even the existence of the barbarian race that the holy sons and holy daughters feared could only be called the king of the 4 crowns. The 5-crown king had become a legend in the barbarian tribe. Will the 5-crown king really appear? Huomei was a little absent-minded. With 5 great totems on his body, he could communicate with the 5 elements. Even a saintess like Huomei could only revere such a peerless character. If the 5-crown king really appeared, it would be a sign of the rise of the 5 elements barbarian tribe. Chapter 354. Yan Xiao, Huomei and the others had broken through the lightning fire valley. In the other regions of the 5 elements ground, it was as if they had planned this beforehand. They launched an attack on the 7 major forces at the same time. In the 9 profound sects encampment, a group of barbarians launched a surprise attack. Among them, there was a figure that was wrapped in lightning. Someone recognized him and screamed in fear. He was the sacred son of the Lightning Clan, Lei Jioming. On the other side, in the Consonance Palace's encampment, a woman with a green snake tattoo on her face looked at the terrified disciples of the Consonance Palace with indifference. She waved her hand casually and blue waves surged out, drowning the group of female disciples of the Consonance Palace. She was the newly risen sacred daughter of the Water Clan, Kueishue Inji. In the limitless sword sect's encampment, the barbarians launched an attack as well. A young figure wearing golden armor and holding a golden spear appeared. His aura soared into the sky and he was insufferably arrogant. The golden spear in his hand pierced through 3 or 4 elite disciples of the limitless sword sect's Sun Moon Hall. He laughed and said, "Where are the geniuses of the limitless sword sect? Where is Xianhao? I am the sacred son of the Gold Clan, Jin Zhanlia. I am waiting for him to fight." As the encampment of the 7 major forces was attacked at the same time, the entire desolate land was in chaos. The barbarian race had officially launched an attack on the Great Wall of the desolate land. The scale of the barbarian race's attack was unprecedented. However, the 7 major forces in the other regions of the Saint Origin dynasty did not notice this change immediately. In the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, the originally peaceful atmosphere became heated again with the opening of the Sword Sect Pagoda. As one of the 3 great places of opportunity in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, the opening of the Sword Sect Pagoda naturally attracted everyone's attention. Unfortunately, the Sword Sect Pagoda was only open to the inner sect disciples. Therefore, the outer sect disciples were not fated to enter the Sword Sect Pagoda. However, this also stimulated their desire to enter the inner sect. On the number 5 peak, Yi Guqin was practicing his sword in the bamboo forest. As Mu Xingzu left and the divine eagle turned into an egg, the entire number 5 peak became somewhat quiet. However, Yi Guqin was already used to this feeling and did not feel lonely. He wielded the Xianming heavy sword, and his sword aura was as heavy as a mountain. With one strike, the entire bamboo forest seemed to tremble. Bamboo leaves filled the sky and fell down like rain. With this Xianming heavy sword, I can begin to comprehend the edgeless sword intent once more. The edgeless sword will is ingenious. It is not swift and fierce, but it has the power of 1,000 caddies. It can even be amplified by the Void Sword technique and the Great Void Sword Wave. It can ignore the enemy's defense and attack the body directly. Yi Guqin was trying to figure it out. Of course, edgeless sword intent was a peerless sword intent after all. It was not something that could be cultivated in a short period of time, so Yi Guqin was not in a hurry. In addition, Yi Guqin was also in the process of comprehending the fire sword essence. As for condensing the 5 elements sword intent, Yi Guqin already had a plan. However, he had to wait until the 5 color totems were all awakened before he could begin to consider it. As long as he could awaken the totem, it would be much easier to comprehend the 5 elements sword intent. This also gave Yi Guqin another goal to go to the land of 5 elements. Just as Yi Guqin was thinking in his heart, a beautiful figure flew over from afar. She had a ponytail and a beautiful face. It was Ji Ling. The Sword Sect Pagoda is about to open. Don't forget about the battle with Shuang. Ji Ling put her hands behind her back and leaned forward slightly, smiling at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin nodded lightly. Seeing this, Ji Ling wrinkled her nose slightly and said, "It seems that you are not worried about this battle at all. Just a defeated opponent." Yi Guqin put away the Xianming heavy sword. Hey, how dare you say that about my Shuang? After she lost the battle with you, she has been cultivating hard these days. She is even crazier than before. Ji Ling said. Her eyes seemed to be filled with pity. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Guqin's eyes were indifferent. Shuang is so beautiful. Aren't you being too unkind to her? Ji Ling twirled her hair with her fingers. She doesn't need others to pity her. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly and said, "Senior sister Ji Ling, let's go to the Sword Sect Pagoda." Ji Ling sighed and nodded slightly. The Sword Sect Pagoda stood on the peak of the mountain. Although the pagoda was not particularly tall, it was simple and grand as if it had existed since ancient times. At this moment, a group of people had already gathered outside the Sword Sect Pagoda. They were all elite disciples of the inner court. There was also Qing He, Gu Tua, and other elders here to preside over the situation. In the crowd, Bai Zichen stood alone in a corner. In the past, he was so extraordinary in the inner court. No matter where he went, there would be people looking up to and following him. But now, Bai Zichen stood alone and seemed to be slightly lonely. Many gazes in the surroundings swept past Bai Zichen from time to time, and all of them carried ridicule. Even though they didn't dare to openly ridicule or offend Bai Zichen due to his cultivation, the shameless things Bai Zichen had done had already caused many inner court disciples to feel slight disgust. As for Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others, they'd drawn a clear line between themselves and Bai Zichen since a long time ago. Senior sister Yan and senior brother Yi are about to arrive, right? Yeah, I'm really looking forward to senior brother Ye's performance. Senior sister Yan and the others had a record of ascending to the 6th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda. I wonder if senior brother Yi will be able to break this record. Senior brother Yi caused a myriad of swords to resound in the forest of 1,000 swords, and was able to leave behind a sword mark on solitary sword cliff. I'm guessing that his performance in the Sword Sect Pagoda will definitely shock us. Numerous disciples were excitedly discussing the matter between Yan Wushuang and Yi Guchen. They were very curious about exactly how many levels Yi Guchen would be able to ascend to if he challenged the Sword Sect Pagoda. Exactly what would the outcome of the battle between him and Yan Wushuang be? As for Bai Zichen, who stood at the side, he clenched his fists tightly when he heard the discussions of the inner court disciples. As long as my performance in the Sword Sect Pagoda this time can surpass Yi Guchen, then I still have hope to once again stand at my previous position and be looked up to by others. Bai Zichen's expression was restrained, but he was roaring in his heart. Bai Zichen felt that as long as his performance was sufficiently dazzling this time, he would be able to return to his previous position. Right at this moment, a beautiful figure arrived from afar. She wore an ice silk skirt armor, and her appearance was peerlessly beautiful. A pair of slender, round, and beautiful legs swayed with her footsteps, moving the heart. Even if Yan Wushuang was defeated by Yi Guchen earlier, it still didn't reduce her popularity. There were even inner court disciples that praised Yan Wushuang for being neither arrogant nor discouraged, as expected of the daughter of the sect master. But at this moment, Yan Wushuang's beautiful face was expressionless. She looked around as if she was looking for Yi Guchen's figure. When her gaze swept past Bai Zichen, Yan Wushuang's gaze didn't stop at all, as if she was looking at an ordinary person. This caused Bai Zichen's heart to feel as if it was dripping blood. At this moment, two figures finally arrived in the distance. It was Yi Guchen and Jiling. Yan Wushuang's gaze collided with Yi Guchen's at the first possible moment. The reason why she disregarded her face and wanted to compete with Yi Guchen again was because she was unwilling to give up just like that. Seeing that the two of them were about to clash again, everyone present looked at Yan Wushuang and Yi Guchen with anticipation in their eyes. Chapter 355. Yi Guchen directly ignored Yan Wushuang's gaze and didn't react at all. Although he had promised Yan Wushuang to compete again, it was just a casual request. He wanted to challenge the Sword Sect Pagoda. Even Yan Wushuang felt a trace of embarrassment when she saw Yi Guchen's indifferent expression that seemed to be disregarding her. Many of the surrounding disciples sighed in amazement. In the Sword Sect Pagoda forest, only Yi Guchen dared to ignore Yan Wushuang like this. If it was anyone else, they would be overjoyed to receive such attention from Yan Wushuang. Although Yi Guchen's reaction was cold, Yan Wushuang still gritted her teeth and said, "Yi Guchen, let's compete this time and see who can reach the highest level of the Sword Sect Pagoda." Yi Guchen nodded indifferently. "Yi Guchen, let me tell you, this Sword Sect Pagoda isn't so easy to pass. Don't fail miserably later." Jiling reminded kindly. Jiling had passed the Sword Sect Pagoda before, so he naturally knew that it wasn't so easy to pass. Even the elites of the inner court like them could only pass the 6th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda's 9 levels. Only the elders had passed the 7th level. As for the 8th level, only Feng Manlu, Yanchanga and Qiushan had entered. The 9th level was like a taboo that no one had entered. Therefore, Jiling's warning wasn't without reason. Yi Guchen naturally wouldn't underestimate the Sword Sect Pagoda. "Alright, almost everyone in the inner court has arrived. Let's begin. Enter one by one. The higher you reach the highest level and the longer you persist, the greater your gains will be." "Elder Qing," he said in a clear voice. The eyes of many inner court disciples revealed excitement. When Yi Guchen had just entered the Sword Sect Pagoda forest, He'd once found out from Chu Qingqi that the density of spirit energy within the Sword Sect Pagoda would double with every level passed, and it was extremely beneficial to one's cultivation. After that, the Sword Sect Pagoda officially opened. Yi Guqin stood indifferently. He didn't choose to be the first to enter, but wanted to observe for a while. Seeing that Yi Guqin didn't move, Yan Wushuang naturally didn't intend to enter for the time being. After that, the disciples entered the Sword Sect Pagoda one by one. After entering the Sword Sect Pagoda, if one broke through a level, that level of the pagoda would emit light. This way, they would be able to directly display how many levels a disciple could reach. However, as the disciples entered one after another, the one with the best performance was only able to reach the 4th level. Moreover, they didn't persist for too long. Looks like this Sword Sect Pagoda isn't so simple. Yi Guqin muttered to himself. Time passed. 2 days had passed, and the best result for the inner campus disciples was the 5th level. At this moment, only the top 10 plus disciples hadn't challenged the Sword Sect Pagoda. I'll go next. Yi Xie stepped forward and took 2 bites of the drumstick. After the Void Sword Realm, his strength had also increased a lot. He now had the cultivation of the Divine Soul 6th transformation. Yi Xie entered the tower, and soon, the first floor lit up. Then the second layer also lit up, and the third layer lit up slightly later. The 4th level was even slower. In the end, he stayed at the 5th level for a long time before he finally broke through. Light lit up, but he was soon teleported out. This proved that Yi Xie had only broken through the 5th level, and hadn't broken through the 6th for the time being. Unlucky. Yi Xie curled his lips as if he wasn't satisfied with his result. Be content. Only senior sister Yan and the others have the ability to reach the 6th level, Chu Qingqi said. After that, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others also began to challenge the pagoda. Their results were slightly better as they reached the 6th level. This was also the result that the top 10 disciples of the inner campus could generally achieve. As for the 7th level, only the elders had the ability to reach it. Huff! Yan Wushuang deeply exhaled. She did not delay any longer. She turned her head and glanced at Yi Guqin. Her beautiful eyes flickered with determination. After which her body flashed and she directly entered the Sword Sect Tower. Senior sister Yan has entered. Which level will she reach? At least the 6th level is certain. It's even possible for her to reach the 7th level. That might not necessarily be the case. The higher you go in the Sword Sect Pagoda, the more difficult it is. The 7th level is absolutely much more difficult than the 6th level. Otherwise, it wouldn't be only the elders that were able to pass through it. When they saw Yan Wushuang enter the pagoda, the spirits of all the disciples were raised. All of them wanted to know if Yan Wushuang, who'd lost to Yi Guqin, would be able to turn the tables. Ji Ling and the others stared fixedly at the movement outside the pagoda as well. Yi Guqin was extremely casual. In next to no time, the 2nd level of the pagoda lit up. It wasn't long before the 3rd level lit up. After that, the 4th level, the 5th level. Yan Wushuang's speed far surpassed ordinary disciples. Even Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, and the others couldn't compare to her. In the end, the light outside the pagoda was stuck at the 6th level. This was already the best result of the inner court disciples, and it was also the record of Yan Wushuang and the others. As for the 7th level, only the elders had passed through it. Time slowly flowed by, and the light was still stuck at the 6th level. Shuang, good luck. Ji Ling broke out in a cold sweat for Yan Wushuang. Finally, after an entire day, the 7th level lit up. She passed. Senior sister Yan passed the 7th level. At this moment, all the disciples outside the Sword Sect Pagoda were shocked. Yan Wushuang was the first person to pass the 7th level apart from the inner court elders, Feng Manlu, and the other 2 experts. This was also enough to prove her strength and talent. Not long after, Yan Wushuang was teleported out. Her aura was weak, and at the same time, her face was a little pale. Clearly, she had exhausted a lot of energy. Even so, a faint smile finally appeared on her beautiful face that had always been indifferent. To be able to make Yan Wushuang smile, it was clear that she was in a good mood at the moment. Her beautiful eyes looked at Yi Guqin, and the light of confidence surged once again. It was as if the pride and stubbornness that had been crushed by Yi Guqin had all returned. Yi Guqin, it's your turn, Yan Wushuang said. Wushuang, let me do it. At this moment, Bai Zichen, who had been standing at the side all this while, stood out and decided to enter. Who allowed you to call me that? Yan Wushuang's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of coldness. Her impression of Bai Zichen was already terrible to the extreme. Bai Zichen's expression changed slightly when he saw this, and he felt a little unnatural. However, in the next moment, Bai Zichen still gritted his teeth and entered the Sword Sect Pagoda. He wanted to announce to everyone that no matter what, he was still a genius and not someone who could be casually criticized. Seeing Bai Zichen enter the pagoda, everyone looked over. Although Bai Zichen's reputation had fallen to the bottom of the inner court, he was still the strongest person apart from Yi Guqin and Yan Wushuang. Therefore, he attracted some attention. Although Bai Zichen has done something wrong, he's still a genius after all. He can adjust his mentality, Gu Tuo said indifferently. Qinghe glanced at him from the side and did not say anything. Although Gu Tuo had lost face because of Bai Zichen was still a genius of the Grand Elders faction. After that, the Sword Sect Pagoda lit up one after another, and finally stopped at the 6th level. Could it be that Bai Zichen can also break through to the 7th level? I think it'll be difficult. Some inner court disciples whispered to each other. While everyone was discussing, the 7th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda suddenly lit up. Bai Zichen really passed the 7th level. The surrounding disciples were in an uproar. Although they were not very interested in Bai Zichen now, his cultivation foundation was indeed something they could not compare to. Not long after, Bai Zichen's figure flashed out. Although he looked even weaker than Yan Wushuang, who had just come out and had exhausted a lot of energy, a faint smile appeared on his face again, and his back unknowingly straightened a little. Even Yan Wushuang was a little surprised and glanced at Bai Zichen. Of course, that was all. She only felt a little surprised. Yi Guqin, you're the last one, Bai Zichen said. He enjoyed looking at the shocked gazes around him. Moreover, he also knew how difficult it was to pass the 6th and 7th levels of the Sword Sect Pagoda. This Sword Sect Pagoda is different from the previous levels. You might be strong, but passing the pagoda is not something you can succeed with just strength. Bai Zichen narrowed his eyes slightly. Both he and Yan Wushuang had passed the Sword Sect Pagoda many times. On the other hand, it was Yi Guqin's first time passing the pagoda. This was a natural disadvantage in itself. Yi Guqin did not react when he saw the playful look in Bai Zichen's eyes. His feet flashed and he directly entered the Sword Sect Pagoda. As Yi Guqin entered, numerous gazes and even a few elders cast over with extreme attention. Among the 3 great opportunities, Yi Guqin had created miracles in the Thousand Sword Forest and Single Sword Cliff. Would he be able to create another miracle in the Sword Sect Pagoda? Everyone was looking forward to it. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.